All right. It's good to go, Heath.
Thanks, Tom. Good evening and welcome to the August 18th, 2020 Ogunquit Select Board meeting. It is 6:02 and I'd like to call this meeting to order. In attendance this evening, we have myself, John Daly, Rick Dolliver, and Lindsay Perry. Bob Wynn messaged me earlier today to indicate that he was not going to be able to make this meeting this evening. Is there a motion to excuse Bob's absence tonight?
So moved, sorry.
I have a motion made by Rick Dolliver. Do we have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Lindsay Perry. Any discussion? I just want to point out, John, your camera doesn't seem to be working.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
But the camera's down. Okay, let me go work on the camera.
Your camera was working just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, it was. Give me a second, but continue.
Okay, so for the audience, we are going to be taking roll call votes moving forward with the state allowing remote meetings. They are asking that we do roll call votes. So we start with the, we're going to go in alphabetical order, and then the chair will go last. So John, how do you vote on the motion at hand?
In the affirmative.
Thank you. And Rick?
Yes.
And Lindsay?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. The motion passes 4-0. Thank you all. I just want to point out to the audience that Pat and I, in putting together the agenda, there were a few versions. And the version that we are working off of is the version that's been posted under the Documents tab under the agenda meeting packet. There was a prior version that is still posted on our website, but I just want to let everyone know the agenda that we're working from is the agenda that is under the packet on the website. And for the select board, this is the packet that was emailed to us. Mr. Dolliver, a question?
Then just give me a second, because I have the agenda from the website printed, so I can go through it. But now I'm going to have to open up the packet. So if you give me a second.
We can do that.
I just want to know where the differences are, or or is it a big deal? Can I just go off the one I printed because it's 5 pages or 4 pages?
I would go off the one in the packet because there are some changes.
Okay, so I guess I don't know how to print 4 pages. Wait a second. Ah, I do. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pages 1 through 4. Okay, you can go ahead while I'm printing.
All right, thank you. The next item up is 2.0, and the agenda says Select Board Chair Update, and that should actually say Select Board Updates. So just starting with 2.1, Technology and Public Access for Select Board Meetings. So just wanted to acknowledge that we understand the technology of our meeting last Tuesday, where the select board was in attendance at the Dunaway Center, and those participating remotely were participating via Zoom. We understand the technology didn't quite work out as we had intended. There was some we had done some run-throughs and those were successful. But when it came to being live, we understand that people definitely struggled not seeing us and seeing our faces, as well as there were times where it was hard to hear select board members talking. So just wanted to acknowledge that we understand that and we've learned from it. And moving forward, if we have to have a similar format, we will only do so if we can truly ensure that the public can hear and see us moving forward. I want to just take this opportunity to thank Matt Buttrick in particular for doing his best to try to organize that meeting, and particularly the format and the technology. Any select board comments on 2.1? Okay, moving on to 2.2. Last Wednesday, the select board met in executive session to consult with our town attorney. We did receive several questions about the topics that we were discussing with our town attorney. And I just wanted to share that at the start of the meeting, a question was asked if we were legally able to have those discussions with our town attorney. And our town attorney did explain that, yes, it is legal per the Freedom of Access Act, per Maine's Freedom of Access Act. And but at the same time, I want to assure everyone, including the public, that no decisions were made. And those items that were discussed with our attorney, there are plans, including some of the discussions that will happen tonight, to have all of those conversations. And if there are any decisions to be made, those decisions will be made in the public purview. Would any select board members like to add anything further? Mr. Dolliver.
I would. I read all of those emails too, obviously. And it's important for everybody to understand that there are times, and hopefully not a lot, but it's a new board. And there are times that boards need to meet with their attorneys for legal advice. And it's not anything being hidden. It's not any hidden agendas. It's legal advice. And I'll get into it a little bit further here in the agenda, but that's the purpose. That's one of the purposes of executive session, is to meet with your attorney. It's like an attorney-client privilege. There are some questions that need to be asked, procedural questions. And as the chair just said, anything else would be discussed in public. We've had some executive sessions in the past that I'm not too sure about, some other boards. And I will assure everybody that the question was asked not once, but twice, that everything is within the rules and regulations of executive session in the state of Maine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dolliver. Would anyone else on the board like to add anything further? Okay, 2.3 on the agenda is, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Selectwoman Perry for suggesting that we just give an update to the public. There has been an appeal of a voter eligibility decision that the town clerk made. The select board will be discussing that appeal process at our next meeting on Tuesday, September 1st. So we just wanted to update everyone to say that there has been an appeal, and the select board will be meeting in public with our attorney to discuss the process, the appeal process, which is a hearing, and just wanted to give everyone an update that that will be occurring at our next meeting. Are there any further thoughts or anything that any select board member would like to add? Okay. Moving on to 2.4, discussion of civility in a time of change. I've written a few comments to sort of kick off this discussion. 2020 has been a stressful year for many of us. When stress hits, we're often not at our best. Further, with leadership changes on the select board, we are going through a period of change. Change is hard for most of us and harder on some, and we all react to change differently. When change happens, some embrace or celebrate the change. For others, they may go through loss, experience fears, doubt can also set in, or even feelings of anxiety. For those of us who have experienced change in groups that we've worked with, we know we are experiencing the forming and storming stages of group development. While this is happening, I'd like to take this opportunity to ask everyone to take a few deep breaths and maybe even take a step back to reflect. Whatever you're going through, it is okay. Your feelings are valid, and no one should tell you to not embrace them. At the same time, I believe it's important that we have civility in our processes and discussions. As a starting place, I have two brief questions to pose to the select board tonight. For me, this is a start to a bigger conversation and one that I hope we have throughout the coming months, in particular as we discuss our priorities and goals. First, last week, the select board met in executive session to discuss our own performance these past few weeks. Without disclosing our conversation last week, would anyone like to say anything publicly regarding your own thoughts, maybe about your performance, or any hopes that you have for the future? Mr. Dolliver.
Very quick. I was a little nervous, but by the end of the meeting, I felt pretty good. I thought we had good dialogue, and I thought we did what we're supposed to do, you know?
All right, thank you. Selectwoman Perry, would you like to add any comments?
No, thank you.
And Selectman Daly, would you like to add any comments?
I guess your question, well, one of your questions was, what do you hope for the future? I guess I hope for the future that we can stop throwing out these words like transparency and ethics and stuff like that, and start just living it and breathing it, and stop just throwing the words around like they're randomly. Let's just live and breathe it as a community. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. For me, I'm hoping that we can spend a lot more time listening, truly listening to each other rather than listening with the intent to understand each other, rather than just listening to respond to each other. And that's my hope for the future. My second question tonight is, as leaders, what, if anything, do we want to do as a select board to help people during this time? How can we encourage healthy discussions and debates on town issues moving forward without disparaging people who may disagree with us? Selectman Dolliver?
It's pretty simple. I mean, not everybody's going to have the same opinion. This town is made up very diverse. We all come from different groups that I'll call them constituents or backers or friends, customers. But just because we may not have the same opinion doesn't mean we have to fight. Doesn't mean we have to be angry or not like each other. There are people on this board that one of my biggest things, we are complete polar opposites in the realm of world politics and especially national politics. And we still get along quite well. We have some heated arguments, but that's good. That's how this country was founded, on compromise. That's our job. You guys have all heard me say it before. I have an opinion. I have an opinion as to what I believe and what I believe the majority of Ogunquit people believe. And I think it's my job to attempt to convince my fellow board members that this is the right approach or the right vision for the future of Ogunquit. That's my job. And sometimes it works well and sometimes it doesn't. And I wish I just want to get along with everybody. I want good, I call them heated debates. I'm okay with that, but it's just a debate. It's a debate, a discussion, a vote, and move on.
Thank you, Mr. Dolliver. Selectman Daley or Selectwoman Perry, any comments from either one of you?
No, thank you.
John, did I see you shaking your head? No comments?
Yeah, no comment, thank you.
Okay. So I know that, throwing out some questions, some people may want to process them further. As I shared, I've shared some of my thoughts this evening about change in particular, and I'm just asking that people take some deep breaths. This board is starting to discuss this evening or hopefully later this evening in our workshop, some of our priorities moving forward. And as I said earlier, I'm hoping that we can continue this discussion moving forward in the coming months. So thank you all. Anything further to add before we move on to 3.0 on our agenda? Okay. Hearing none, 3.0 is an opportunity for public comments. The Select Board welcomes public comments and questions about agenda items and town-related matters. And we ask that people keep comments brief and to the point, under 3 minutes. We ask that if you have a complaint or concern, it would be most helpful if you also are able to offer a solution or solutions. Tonight we have Tom Orlando helping us moderate. And Tom, it appears we do have a couple participants with their hands raised.
Yep, first is Rebecca Fox. You should be able to unmute.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay?
We can, and Rebecca, if you just wouldn't mind stating your street address as well.
Marginal Avenue in Ogunquit.
Thank you.
And what you were just talking about is a perfect segue for the question that I have, and it relates to the process of free speech. According to Select Board Rules, document number 8, there should be public input included as part of each action item on the agenda. However, at the last meeting, and apparently at this meeting, there is only public input relevant to any and all items on the agenda available only at the very beginning of the meeting. This gives the public no timely opportunity to offer information, opinion, or add to the discussion on any item that may become an important Select Board decision. How are we to know what comments we have on an item without first hearing its presentation and initial discussion? Why may we not be permitted to participate during the discussion of an action item on the agenda? Why was the rule summarily changed at the last meeting by the chair? And are you planning on continuing to limit relevant public input in this way? And I would like an answer, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. The Select Board has agreed that we would answer any questions posed either now or before our next meeting, or at our next meeting. Tonight, later in the meeting, we're going to be discussing some of our rules, and I think this is a relevant discussion for our workshop. Thank you for your comments.
Next up is Peter Kahn.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Peter.
Great, thank you. I'd like to bring the public's attention.
Peter, excuse me, would you mind just stating the
Sorry.
street?
Yep, Peter Kahn, 3-turn Street.
Thank you.
As I was saying, I'd like to bring to the public's attention a couple of recent disturbing events relating to town boards and committees. Priscilla Bodford resigned from the planning board, and the longtime chair of the Historical Preservation Commission, Sumner Neisted, withdrew his application for reappointment. The common theme here is bullying and social media stalking in this beautiful place by the sea. The board should take the time to review the chat on the police Facebook page during the recent OHPC meeting. It was and is a disgrace. The town should not be facilitating negativity. Why is the chat displayed on Facebook, but not on Zoom at town committee meetings? Zoom is the official town record. There seems to be an equal access problem here. How can the town continue to foster bullying during committee meetings? And yes, during committee meetings. I urge the board to address the issue by scheduling a workshop or other forum to begin community dialogue with the aim of eradicating bullying. The select board needs to lead on this topic before other boards and committees are stripped of valuable members. It's a shame to see valued committee members decide not to continue serving the community because of fear of retribution. Remember the old saying, if you don't want to be part of the solution, you're likely part of the problem. Thank you for letting me speak this evening.
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate your comments.
Barbara or Pat?
Hi, this is Pat Hussey.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Ocean Heights Lane, and I really appreciate this is a better format in terms of being to help. So here, thank you. Last week, our town manager, Pat Finnegan, told us that her 6-month contract extension was essentially a termination notice. Pat said she was entering into negotiations in good faith and hoped the select board would as well. She also wanted to know what the expectations were of her over and above what is written in the charter for her sake, as well as successive town managers, and for the general public for us to know as well. So since the clock is ticking, I would like to know from the select board, maybe you're going to be dealing with this later, what specifically those expectations are and when they will be made public. But just for a moment, I want to put this renewal contract in light of and recount some of the history of the former town manager, whose contract was renewed 3 times in 7 years. I reread the account recently and shared this with board members from the Portland Press. Tom Fortier's salary with benefits was well over $100,000. 1, he used town-issued credit cards for personal use within the first few months. 2, he received loans from 2 select board members at the time, Jackie Bevins and Phil Cavaretta, for $5,000 each. 3, he accepted a $110,000 mortgage loan from a builder developer and an additional $5,000 when he was on administrative leave. 4, he fired the DPW director, John Weber, employed and director for 34 years at the behest of a select board member. It cost the town $775,000, of which $200,000 was paid by taxpayers. The FBI, 5, the FBI investigated the theft of $10,400 in parking fees, and the town manager was the prime suspect. Charges were not pursued, and thankfully, cameras were installed. 6, he stole money on July 4th and exploited high school kids while doing so. And 7, our police chief called him a liar and a criminal. Yet with his actions over 7 years and extolled by some as the best town manager ever, Tom Fortier's contract was renewed 3 times. I just want people to put this in perspective as you discuss Pat Finnegan's contract. In good faith, these are very powerful words. And with those words, will they be honored or will they be sullied by the select board? I ask you to consider in good faith very seriously. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Pat.
And Patience, you should be able to unmute.
Hi, I think I'm unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi, this is Patience Sundaresan on Josiah's Lane, Ogunquit. I'd just like to make a statement regarding the appointments and the reappointment process. I think the public and all the applicants deserve to know and understand what the process actually is, and that process should be clear. So for the last couple of select board meetings, it has not been clear, and there've been some inconsistencies in what was stated, at least from my observation. So first, there was a deadline for the first round of applicants to get applications in by July 30th, and that was for the quote unquote first round of appointments. But then the first round only included some committees. Then the chair said he had a process for interviewing people, which was only to interview those applicants who were not currently on a board or had not been on a board for a few years or so. But then for the planning board, there was an interview with an applicant who is on a current board. So the process seemed somewhat inconsistent. Also, for the person who was not given the opportunity to be interviewed on budget review, the two people who were interviewed were both appointed, but not the one applicant that week who did not have the opportunity to be interviewed. And so I wonder if this interview process itself, it does not seem fair to applicants or reappointees, nor is it perhaps fair to the public. The public is not getting to hear from everybody applying for a board. Sorry, I had to write down a note. Somebody on the board in making this appointment said that the voters wanted to move in another direction, but didn't really articulate what they meant by that. And again, the public did not have the opportunity to hear from that third applicant. And tonight, it seems like there's a second round of appointments and reappointments for some committees, but this is the first round for other committees. So again, it's a little bit confusing. Also, the terms, I think a select board member said at that last meeting that you had made a hard rule, or it was a legal rule that you had decided that June 30th was the cutoff and that terms ended on June 30th. But there were boards, there was a quasi judicial board that met after that with members whose terms had expired. So again, I think it would be helpful if there were a written policy by the select board that clearly articulates what this process is and what those terms. I see that later on in the agenda now you have added perhaps a discussion about how the terms end.
Patience, thank you for your comments. Your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
And Jim, you should be able to talk.
Jim, you may need to unmute yourself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'd just like to comment on his statement before about having the jitters and everybody.
Jim, I'm not able to hear you. Jim, I heard you.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay,
I'll restart your time, sir.
thank you. Appreciate that. I listened to Selectman Rick Dolliver's statement about a new board and the jitters and having to deal with situations that are very important to the people of Ogunquit and having to kick off the first meeting right after the election and so forth. I understand all that, but I don't understand somebody who's making that statement who served on the select board for probably 7-8 years. Why should that person have the jitters? That person should know everything that's needed to know as a select board member to be able to function correctly as a select board member. So I'm confused by that statement, but I'll let you guys handle that. The second part is, I don't know if I joined late, but I'm just wondering if this board has seceded to another country. I didn't see the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Did I miss something? That's my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate your comments.
I see Barbara and Pat again. I'm assuming it's the other one.
Yes, this is Barbara. Can you hear me?
Hi, Barbara. Yes, we can.
Barbara Ferraro, Ocean Heights Lane. Yeah, I see that you want solutions, and I have a solution for tonight, if you're willing to hear it. Under committee appointments, I like the fact that you clarified why you did how you do reappointments, and you say that when there are no more applicants than positions, the appointments have been included in the consent agenda. Well, I'd like you to go back to last week to the Budget Review Committee. There were no others, and there was a position for a second alternate for Peter Kahn, and you excluded him. And in fairness, tonight, there is a position for second alternate. And I think if you're really being fair and honest about your movement forward, then Peter should be appointed as that second alternate. The other two people that are on that list had not applied last time. I see that they have come in and applied. And also just a reminder, 300 people did vote for Peter. So do minority voices not matter anymore? So I'm just offering that as a solution to let's work together. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate your comments, Barbara.
And Mark, you should be able to unmute.
I will just say, this is Mark McLeod from Bayview Avenue. I remember this time. Thanks, Pam. I would just say that this board is, I think it's the third or is it the fourth public meeting. The comments for every meeting have been almost exclusively members of the party that lost 8 out of 8 elections substantially. And it seems that now that they've been voted out of power by the residents of Ogunquit, that they intend to participate in ruling of the town by badgering, both with emails and Facebook comments and select board comments. So I would just like to urge the town, if the residents, if we want to work together, let's work together, but let's stop the badgering and let's stop the nitpicking and let's start looking for the future. Stop looking back to Tom Fortier and start looking ahead to Pat and see what we can do as a town. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. We appreciate your comments.
And there are no other hands. There's one hand that just went up.
Okay.
Ben, you should be able to unmute.
Thank you. This is Ben Hershenson, Myrtle Circle. And my comments tonight are going to be relegated to some effort I did on behalf of the town as coming up with a code of ethics. I'm speaking as an individual property owner. I do not serve in any committee or boards at the present time. In 2016, I volunteered to draft the first code of ethics for the select board and committees. And with revisions, the select board adopted the codes in 2018. It seems lately that a lot of people on town committees, perhaps specifically several committee members, while in actual meetings, made negative comments regarding a local restaurant owner, made comments about the food, as well as negative comments about private individuals. The code is quite clear. Conduct of committee members, the professional conduct of members must be above reproach of use of contact or making personal charges or disparaging comments or remarks, or from verbal attacks upon the character or motives of members of town boards or of town staff or of citizens. It is one thing to have private conversations as citizens, but it's quite another to make disparaging comments as members of a town committee, especially during a newly noticed public meeting. In my opinion, such behavior is irresponsible and frankly, plain wrong. Again, I'm only speaking about comments made by committee members during actual meetings. I urge the select board to proceed with workshops or even an open discussion at select board meetings on further defining the responsibility of board and committee members. We do not need expensive consultants to tell us how to be civil when in business session as committee members. And I'll close with this one comment. It is easy to allege wrongdoing, yet it is quite another to prove them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. We appreciate your comments.
And there are no more hands.
Okay, thank you. The next agenda item for us this evening is 4.0, consent agenda rule adoption. So we started to, last meeting, we started to have a consent agenda on our meeting agenda. I'll admit the conversation was a bit convoluted, and we received some suggestions since then. And assuming this is approved, I'll spend some time before or as we begin discussing 5.0 on our agenda. I'll spend some time sort of outlining the things that I've read about since our last meeting to ensure that we're following the process appropriately. With that said, there are some people who believe that the select board needs to adopt a rule to use the consent agenda process moving forward. Personally, it's unclear to me because there's some information online that suggests, yes, the board needs to adopt a rule, and there's some that are silent on the issue. I have ordered Robert's Rules of Order book. So moving forward in the future, when there are questions like this, I can refer to the actual document itself rather than opinions posted online. With that said, in conversations about the agenda, Pat and I felt like there was no harm in asking the select board to adopt the rule. The suggested action for the select board tonight is to approve the following addition to our rules. A consent agenda may be presented by the chair at the beginning of the meeting. Items may be removed from the consent agenda on the request of any one member. Items not removed may be adopted by general consent without debate. At the discretion of the select board, removed items from the consent agenda may be taken up either immediately after the consent agenda, placed later on the agenda, or taken up at a future meeting. Are there any thoughts from the board before I ask for a motion? Mr. Dolliver.
I guess a couple of things. First, I'm not really interested in a motion to add a consent agenda, as we're going to go into hopefully executive session and discuss those topics later. And I'd rather just have a meeting down the road and go with our select board rules and how we're going to do things. But I'll go with the majority of the board. I think the consent agenda as a general principle is good because it can speed up the meetings. The problem here is I'm going to ask to remove a couple of them for a simple comment. I have to make a comment or I wouldn't feel right about myself just letting it be approved. So in this case, it's not going to speed up the process. It's going to slow it down. And they're very simple comments, but once it's approved and there's no discussion, it's over and we move on. And I don't think I would be doing my job correctly if I didn't make the comments.
Thank you, Mr. Dolliver. Would anyone else like? Ms. Perry.
Thank you. Is there any harm in revisiting this at our next meeting to give us more time to think about it and do our own work on it? Or is this something that you want to expedite?
I don't see any harm except for the fact that I did put together with Pat the consent agenda item. So that would be the only harm, is that we could either table those items till our next meeting or we could discuss them and move them. I would suggest moving them down to committee appointments. And then I think there's a few other consent agenda items that we would have to add as regular items on our agenda tonight.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes.
So, so in order to move forward with those pieces that I know are important to do so tonight, we can't make a one-time exception for this evening and then adopt it and possibly adopt it as a regular rule, because I feel like I understand why we want to allow something this evening, but to make it a more permanent rule going forward, I feel like we might still want a little bit more time with it, especially since we're missing one board member.
Okay.
Mr. Chair?
Lindsay, thank you for your comments. Go
We've
ahead,
already-
Mr. Dolliver.
We've already done it. You know what I'm saying? To Lindsay's point, we've already done this at a meeting. It's new, but it's not something new because we've already had consent agenda. So the problem here is 5.6 is a big consent agenda. And that's the one I want to talk about along with 5.3. So if there was a way we could, see, if I just don't say anything about 5.6, it's consented, we all agree, we move on. But I have a statement to make about committee appointments. And I think it has to be made. Do I then think we have to go through every single one and vote on it? No, I don't. I think it's a great consent agenda idea, which is, to Lindsay's point, I think it would be best if we could wait a week to vote on consent agenda, but almost to allow it tonight. Except allowing it tonight, I'm still going to slow down the process because I'm going to ask to pull 5.6 out. So I'm sorry.
And that will happen moving forward. Not everyone will agree with the items that the chair puts on the consent agenda. And as a result, either if you want to have discussion on an item and or if you think you might not be voting in favor of that item and or if you're planning to not vote in favor of that item, everything I've read is you have to ask for it to be removed from the consent agenda item for consideration. To your point, and to Lindsay's point and your point about we did this at the last meeting, you'll note that we added the things that we approved in the consent agenda at the last meeting. We added them again to this consent agenda item. Again, assuming you would approve this rule, so that it was just clear that we followed the formal process, assuming that a rule has to be created.
A
Lindsay,
point of clarity, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Mr. Dolliver, just give me a second. I was processing.
Okay.
Lindsay, I was processing what you had to say, and certainly we could take, I think we could take a motion tonight that we adopt the consent agenda rule for this evening, and then, and this evening only, and that would allow us to move forward as planned. We don't have to do that, but that is an option, and then we could give everyone some more time to discuss it further at our next meeting. Mr. Dolliver?
Can somebody have a comment about a consent agenda and still be okay with the consent agenda? That's my issue, is a consent agenda, I believe by definition is there's no discussion and you just consent. I'm probably consenting to this, but I have to make a statement. And I can't seem to find it anywhere on consent agenda is, can you make a public statement, which the public should hear from, in this case, me. I feel the public should hear what I have to say. I'm not saying I don't consent to 5.6 or 5.5.
My understanding of a consent agenda is minimal questions can be asked just as a point of clarity on consent agenda items. But beyond that, if there is any significant discussion to take place, then the item should be removed. And again, either added right after the consent agenda item later in the meeting or at a future meeting. Mr. Daly, do you have any comments?
You're muted, John.
I can go either way, you know, with Rick said and what Lindsay said, I can go either way, whether we do it tonight or the next meeting. But in general, you know, I never heard of a consent agreement before 2 weeks ago. It sounds like a good idea because I'm not big on formalities, and look at the liquor license. Sometimes in springtime, we can have 10, 12 people applying for liquor and amusement license, and they all go through most of the time. I think 1 out of 100 maybe gets stalled, gets delayed or pushed away. There's a question from the public. So I think consent agreement makes sense in some applications. So I'm on board with heading that direction. How quickly you move, I'm fine. If you want to wait, I'm fine. But I think it's a good direction to head in. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Pat, we talked about this, and my understanding is, as it pertains to liquor licenses or any licenses, that if it's a relicense, then it could be part of a consent agenda. But if it is a new applicant, then that cannot be part of a consent agenda. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding. I think we might want to just double check, but that is my understanding.
Yeah, and then the question comes up about right now with the COVID exceptions, we are not holding public hearings. Once we are no longer under these exceptions, the question is about the public hearing process. So John, it may or may not speed up the licensing process moving forward. Okay. I would like to entertain a motion that the select board approves the following addition to our rules for this one meeting. That tonight a consent agenda is presented by the chair at the beginning of the meeting, and items may be removed from the consent agenda on the request of any one member. Items not removed may be adopted by general consent without debate. At the discretion of the select board, remove items from the consent agenda may be taken up either immediately after the consent agenda, placed later on the agenda, or taken up at a future meeting. To clarify, the motion would be for this evening, this one meeting only. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Well, I heard several people move.
Mr. Daly?
So moved, John Daly.
Hold on a second. I just want to say, Matt, I'm getting some, or excuse me, Tom, I'm getting some messages that I've been signed out.
You're not.
I mean, I can see everybody just fine.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Dolliver, you motioned first. Is that correct?
Mr. Daly?
Mr. Daly, you motioned first. Is that correct? All right. We have a motion on the table, Mr. Daly. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second by Mr. Dolliver. Is there any further discussion? Okay. We'll take a roll call vote, again in alphabetical order. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I vote yes. The motion is adopted by a 4-0 vote.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you all. Yes, Mr. Dolliver.
if we're going to go into consent agenda now, if I could remove 5.3 and 5.6.
Yep, hold on a second, and I will ask that question at the start of the consent agenda.
Okay.
We are now moving on to 5.0 of the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that any one member would like removed, either for discussion and or debate, etc.?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Dolliver.
if I could remove 5.3 and 5.6 for a brief discussion.
Okay, let me just take a look at those items. I would like to suggest that we move 5.3 to immediately right after the consent agenda item on our agenda. And 5.6, I would like to suggest that we move that discussion down to committee appointments. Hold on a second. I am looking at our agenda, which is 9.1. Does that work for everyone on the board? Okay, hearing no concerns about that approach, that's how we will move forward. Are there any other consent agenda items that any select board member would like removed from our consent agenda this evening? Okay, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda tonight?
So moved.
So let me clarify. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda this evening with the removals of 5.3 and 5.6?
So moved.
A motion has been made by Selectman Dolliver. Do we have a second? I will second the motion. At this time, I will take a roll call. There's no discussion on consent agenda items. So at this time, I'll take a roll call vote. Again, in alphabetical order. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I am a yes vote as well. The consent agenda with removing items 5.3 and 5.6 passes. 4-0. Thank you. All right, so next up on our agenda is the addition of what was 5.3 on our consent agenda, and that's meeting minutes for July 29th, 2020. Do we have discussion before I ask for a motion? Mr. Dolliver.
All I'd like to do is add, if I could, there was a recording of the walkthrough at the bathroom. And I think we're all still awaiting copies of that, and it's not in the minutes. I'd just like the minutes to reflect that there was a recording, and I, to date, have not got that recording, and I'd like to have it. Second, I'd also like the record to show that the 1-year warranty was stated at the meeting, that it starts, the clock starts ticking as soon as the final punch list is completed. And I want the record to reflect that the 1-year warranty on all work starts when the actual job is fully complete. And
Thank you, Mr.
Everything else is fine. I just needed those 2 additions to the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Dolliver. Are there any other suggested changes to the minutes for 5.3? Selectwoman Perry?
Can you just give me 1 second? Can you just hold for 1 second? I'm just looking
Sure.
for it. Thank you. I agree with Select Board Member Dolliver that I also would like to hear the recording. But also I had a concern about how the meeting adjourned, and that Mr. Dolliver did abstain and left prior to the true ending of the meeting, and did not participate in the final vote. And I don't see that reflected in the minutes.
I didn't leave. I was right there. I abstained. I'd agreed to that. I abstained.
Okay, any other discussion on 5.3, the meeting minutes for July 29th, 2020? I'd like to entertain a motion that we approve the minutes of July 29th, 2020 with the following amendments. That the minutes state that there was a recording by a private citizen, and the select board is anticipating getting a copy of that. The person who did record the meeting said that they would provide a copy to us. The second is that the 1-year warranty, it was stated at the meeting that the 1-year warranty on the construction begins when all of the items on the punch list have been completed, if I understand that correctly. And then the third is that the motion to end our meeting was voted, that Rick Dolliver abstained from that vote. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes with those changes?
So moved.
We have a motion made by Mr. Dolliver. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Selectwoman Perry. This time I'd like to call a roll call vote, again in alphabetical order. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. And I too am a yes. The motion passes 4-0.
Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you.
I might
Absolutely.
just just to clarify, there was a recording of the meeting. I did not put that in the minutes, but we have received that recording. I just have not made copies for the select board members. We received one copy, so it is in hand. So we will get that distributed.
All right. Thank you so much.
Sure.
All right. Moving on to our next agenda item, we have no liquor and amusement licenses under 6.0 to approve this evening. Under 7.0, we have no presentations, proclamations, resolutions, and communications. Under 8.0, we have no old business. So that brings us to 9.0, which is new business. Tonight, we're going to discuss the appointments to town committees and boards that were not on the consent agenda, including the addition of 5.6 that was removed from the consent agenda. Mr. Dolliver, do you have a question?
Sorry, I just didn't know, because I don't realize what, the whole consent agenda yet. I just wanted to make sure we were going to bring up 5.6 before we do 9.1. So it's like 9.0 and a half, maybe.
I was thinking of putting it after our board of, I was thinking of putting it after 9.1B and adding it as 9.1C. That's my thought process, but I certainly am happy to adjust if you would prefer we adjust.
I would ask that it go to 9.0 and a half for the simple fact that the statement really is a broad statement that will encompass all committees, boards. And I would ask the board for a little leeway. It's a 10-second statement.
Okay. And does anyone disagree with, at this point, entertaining what was 5.6 on our consent agenda at this time? All right. Excuse me, I'm scrolling up on my computer screen. All right, 5.6 is the committee appointments of the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, the Conservation Commission, the Heritage Museum, Marginal Way, Sustainability, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Zoning Board of Appeals. With that said, is there any discussion before we start taking motions on these appointments? Mr. Dolliver.
Real quick, I've watched some meetings and I've read some emails from committee members and board members. There appears to be some serious accusations by members about members. And these concerns, in my opinion, but it appeared that through legal counsel that any of these concerns should be done in executive session. I'm just not sure it's an appropriate place at a live meeting to bring accusations against somebody when that person is not aware of the accusations and they don't have a chance to defend themselves. I don't know the whole legal ramifications. It's something I'd like a better clarity on, but I know in speaking with the town attorney, any performance, I forget the word I'm looking for. Somebody help me. Any job performance, and concerns should be done in executive session even at a committee level. And I say this in part because my name was not, but my person was referenced in one of these emails. And I don't want to say I am ready to defend myself, but I am more than prepared to defend myself. But I wasn't given that chance. Some accusations were made. And I just don't think it's the appropriate way to do things. So I'm not saying that I would not. This is why that whole consent agenda. I'll probably vote people onto these committees, but I would do it in a fashion that I think everybody needs to understand. There is a code of ethics for boards and committees, and making accusations, even if they're true. You still have to let your accuser, and that's from the words of the attorney. So I had a problem with the way things were done. I don't want anybody to think anybody should be muffled. They shouldn't. People's opinions, people's rights. I think you all know I'm very hard on First Amendment rights. You can say anything you want, but when the law says these are where these things should be discussed and how they should be discussed, I think we should ask and command that that's how it's done. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dolliver, for your comments. I'm opening up some comments that I shared in a recent email pertaining to this. And it is regarding the Freedom of Access Act. I believe that's what you're actually referring to, Mr. Dolliver. And it is section 405, which discusses when and how a board can go into executive session and what are the topics that can be discussed in the executive session. It also shares some information that includes the rights of somebody being accused of when there are concerns, allegations, or charges made. And so basically what it says is that the Maine's Freedom of Access Act requires the town, and thus town officials, to hold discussions regarding investigation or hearing of charges or complaints against a person or persons. And that even includes town volunteers. As Mr. Dolliver said, the attorney has advised the select board that this includes those who serve on our town committees, boards, and commissions. That when there is an investigation or hearing of charges or complaints, that happen in executive session, unless the accused party has waived their right to privacy. And if the discussion could be reasonably expected to cause damage to the individual's reputation, or the individual's right to privacy would be violated. So I believe that's the language from the law, with a few additions based off of our attorney's guidance. Are there any other discussions regarding the committee appointments that were listed under 5.6 on our agenda before I start to entertain motions? Okay, at this time, I'd like to entertain a motion for our Bike Pedestrian Committee. Terms to expire on June 30th, 2023 for voting members on the Bike Pedestrian Committee. We have two applicants, Priscilla Botsford and Bruce Bjorkman, and I probably did not say that correct. Do we have a motion to approve these appointments?
So moved.
Motion made by Selectwoman Perry. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Selectman Daley. Any discussion? All right, at this time, hearing no discussion, I'd like to do a roll call vote. And again, starting with Mr. Daley. How do you vote?
Yes.
Mr. Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mrs. Perry, how do you vote? Lindsay, Miss Perry or Miss Perry, or I know that we've discussed this, Select Woman Perry.
Whatever comes out, it's fine. I don't care.
How do you vote?
Yes.
All right, and I too am a yes. The motion passes 4-0. Moving along to our Conservation Commission. We have 2 members on our agenda to approve tonight. Their terms would expire on June 30th, 2023. The applicants are Douglas Mayer and Pamela Sawyer. Do I have a motion to approve these applicants with terms to expire on June 30th, 2023 for the Conservation Commission?
So moved.
I heard Selectwoman Perry first. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Selectman Dolliver. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0. Moving on to number C, the Heritage Museum. We are considering appointments for terms to expire on June 30th, 2023. And these would be 2 voting members. The applicants are Patricia Ware and Peter Woodbury. Do I have a motion to approve these applicants for the Heritage Museum terms to expire June 30th, 2023 as voting members?
So moved.
So moved by Selectman Dolliver. Do I have a second?
Everybody's muted.
I will second that motion. Any discussion on the Heritage Museum motion? Hearing none, I will call a roll call vote. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0. Next up is number D, or letter D. It's the Marginal Way Committee. We have 2 members being considered, terms to expire on June 30th, 2023. The applicants are Joan Griswold and Louisa Gillespie. Do I have a motion to approve these applicants for the Marginal Way Committee as voting members, terms to expire on June 30th, 2023?
So moved.
So moved by Selectman Dolliver. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Selectwoman Perry. Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll take a roll call vote. John Daly,
Yes.
Rick Dolliver,
Yes.
Lindsay Perry,
Yes.
and I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
when we talk about consent agenda, can we also look into, now that we had a discussion and I said what I had to say, is there a way to roll these all back together? It's like a second consent agenda. It's the thought that, could you do a consent agenda? And if there was something that somebody really needed to say, you pull it out, you put it back in. I mean, you say what you say, and then later in the meeting, you can do it again. Just a thought.
I think, I don't think we can do a second consent agenda, but we could have I probably could have entertained a motion that stipulated all of these committees and all of these appointments as one big motion, but chose to take them one at a time. But I do appreciate your comments for the future. Selectwoman Perry?
I just want to make a comment regarding what Select Board Member Dolliver just said. I think that it is definitely tedious and it's at times annoying to have to go through this over and over, but I think it is respectful to the people that have taken the time to apply to the boards to give them that time to even just list their name for the public to hear. It's just, it may be tedious for us, but it's respectful to the community members. That's all. That's my opinion.
Thank you for your comments, Selectwoman Perry. All right, I'm going to move us on to letter E, Sustainability Committee. We are considering for the Sustainability Committee one voting member, term to expire June 30th, 2023, and the applicant is Patience Prescott Sunderson. as well as 2 alternate terms to expire June 30th, 2021. And the applicants are Priscilla Botsford and Marjorie Katz. Is there any discussion before I entertain a motion? All right, do we have a motion to, oops, go ahead.
I just have a little discussion on this one. I mean, I don't think it's gonna get us anywhere, but I know that one of the concerns of this particular group is that they've never actually met. And so there was original hope and consideration that everything would have just pressed reset and that we didn't even vote on this, but it's not making any change specifically because we're doing this, so it doesn't matter. We just wanted the community to know that they did have a meeting and it just, COVID happened. And so they had concerns, but with this vote here, it shows that not much is changing in their proceeding, which is great, but it was a concern that all of the other terms that are set up to expire, it's like, I know that the committee had hoped that everything would just sort of reset itself, but it is what it is. But if you guys had any concerns about that either, then great, but otherwise, it's fine.
Thank you for those comments. The Sustainability Committee got started this winter, or we as a select board officially approved the formation of the Sustainability Committee. And I believe it was February, maybe, sometime midwinter, the select board approved the first appointments. And as doing so, some members were appointed at that time to 3-year terms, 2-year terms, 1-year terms, and the alternates. And as a result of that, some folks' term expired this past June. And these are, in essence, reappointments to those same positions moving forward, with the exception of if approved, patients would serve now a 3-year term moving forward, and Priscilla and Marjorie would get to serve a full 1-year alternate term. Any further discussion? I'd like to entertain a motion to approve a motion to approve Sustainability Committee members, Sustainability Committee member term to expire June 30th, 2023 of Patience Prescott Sunderson. And then
we already have a motion and a second. I believe Lindsay's comments were under discussion, weren't they?
no, I don't have a motion or a second on the table.
All right.
Pre-discussion, it was pre-motion.
Yes. All right, let me start over. Do I have a motion to approve for the Sustainability Committee, 1 member, Patience Prescott Sunderson, for a term to expire June 30th, 2023, and 2 alternates, Priscilla Botsford and Marjorie Katz, terms to expire June 30th, 2021.
So moved.
So moved by Selectwoman Perry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Selectman Dolliver. Any further discussion before I take a roll call vote? Hearing none. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. That the motion passes 4-0.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Dolliver.
I think we missed Kristen Arnold under marginal way alternate.
I see Pat shaking her head yes that we missed that. So let's go back and do that. Any discussion before I ask for a motion? All right. I'd like to entertain a motion for the Marginal Way Committee, an alternate position, term to expire June 30th, 2021 for Kristen Arnold. Do I have a motion? Motion made by Mr. Dolliver. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Selectwoman Perry. Any further discussion?
Is John here?
I see him smiling and he's been voting, so.
I'm just joshing him.
I have to reach my mute button. It's too far away from me.
Gosh, do you?
All right, hearing no further discussion, I will take a roll call vote. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0. Now moving on to letter F, Zoning Board of Appeals. We have applicants Jerry DeHart and Jay Smith for voting member terms to expire June 30th, 2023. And applicants Carol Aaron and Glenn Delensky for alternate terms to expire June 30th, 2021. Any discussion?
I am so sorry. My dog just walked in and distracted me, and I don't know which one we're on. I apologize.
We are on F.
Zoning board.
Zoning board. Thank you.
Mr. Dolliver, did you want to say something? How do I pronounce Glenn's last name?
Delateski.
Delateski. All right. Any discussion before I entertain a motion? Rick, I'm glad you were reaching for some water. All right, I will like to entertain a motion for the Zoning Board of Appeals. 2 members, Jerry DeHart and Jay Smith, terms to expire June 30th, 2023, and 2 alternates, Carol Aaron and Glenn Delateski, terms to expire June 30th, 2021.
So
Do I have a
moved.
motion?
So moved.
By Selectman Daley. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Selectman Dolliver. Any further discussion? All right, I'll take a roll call vote. Selectman Daley, how do you vote?
Yes.
Selectman Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Selectwoman Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0. Yes, let's all take a deep breath, right?
Oh, I'm off mute. Oh, and you heard what I said.
Okay, now moving on to what is 9.1A on our agenda, and this is consideration for appointments for the Board of Assessment Review. We have 2 member openings, voting member openings, terms to expire June 30th, 2023, and we have 2 alternate openings, terms to expire June 30th, 2021. We have 3 applicants, Paul Breen, Peter Kahn, and Glenn Delateski. Wow. All right. Do we have any discussion before I entertain a motion? Okay, we're going to take, oh, Mr. Dolliver, would you like to say something?
No, I was just going to make a motion.
All right. I would like to take these one at a time, if possible. So do I have a motion to approve a member for the Board of Assessment Review term to expire June 30th, 2023? Mr. Dolliver.
I move that we appoint Glenn Delateski.
All right. Do we have a motion on the table? Is there a second? I will second that motion. Do we have any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0. Do I have a motion? Moving on. Do I have a motion for a voting member on the Board of Assessment Review term to expire June 30th, 2023? Selectwoman Perry.
I'd like to move to put Peter Kahn on the Board of Assessment Review.
All right, we have a motion to put Peter Kahn as a voting member on the Board of Assessment Review, term to expire June 30th, 2023. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Dolliver. Is there any discussion? All right, hearing none, I'm going to call a roll call vote. John Daly.
Yes.
Rick Dolliver.
Yes.
Lindsay Perry.
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0. Next up is a alternate appointment for the Board of Assessment Review, term to expire June 30th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion to appoint Paul Breen as an alternate, term to expire June 30th, 2021.
All right, we have a motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second by Selectwoman Perry. Any discussion? Hearing none, I will take a roll call vote. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0. Last up under appointments is for our Budget Review Committee. We have one have one alternate term. It is actually the second alternate on the Budget Review Committee, term to expire June 30th, 2021. Do we have any, and the applicants are Carol Aaron, Jackie Bevins, and Peter Kahn. Any discussion before I entertain a motion? I'll just add that we do have the option to not appoint somebody to this position if we want. I just want the board to know that that is an option, because at our last meeting, we appointed a first alternate and a second alternate. But as a result of our first alternate moving up to being a voting member, and our second alternate then moved up to being the first alternate. So I just want to let the board know that we always have the option to leave a position vacant if we prefer. And in this case, knowing that the first alternate who was moved up to voting member till our November election may not have a seat moving forward if we fill this second alternate position. Any other discussion before I entertain a motion? All right. You have a question? Yeah, go ahead, Selectwoman Perry.
Thank you. So I feel like this is an opportunity to re-highlight the importance of the fact that Peter Kahn was already in the running. He had his application in on time. We had an open position ready for him on that date. The other two applicants turned their, I know there was a mix up, but they turned their applications in late, past the deadline. And I think that we should be honoring opportunities that people meet deadlines for. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Selectwoman Perry. And I think that highlights, and I appreciate, actually reminds me that to let the public know that we were informed. We received an email from one of the applicants stating that they had contacted our town clerk before the deadline and made arrangements to turn in their application the next day, and that they were told that that would be okay. I think that comes from past, how things have operated in past years, where anyone who applied before the agenda was set was considered, and we certainly made a change this year by putting a deadline in place. That said, do I have a motion to approve a second alternate to the Budget Review Committee, term to expire June 30th, 2021? Selectman Dolliver.
I make a motion that we appoint Carol Aaron to the position of second alternate, term to expire June 30th, 2021.
We have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
We have a second by Selectman Daly. Any further discussion?
One last piece of discussion.
Yes. Selectwoman Perry.
I think I'm just slightly confused as well, and I know this hasn't been brought up, but in the past, I don't recall ever assigning first and second alternate, including when I myself was an alternate on BRC. So has that been traditional protocol? Am I just recalling that incorrectly?
I believe it is, but I'm going to defer to our town manager for an official answer as to how this has been handled in the past.
My recollection is that we have assigned people the first and second alternates for BRC.
For specifically BRC.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just
My
want,
recollection could be faulty.
I think in particular for BRC, because our town charter references, if there's ever a vacancy of a regular voting member, anyone who is in the first alternate position moves up. That is my understanding. As in particular for BRC, it is probably worthy of a discussion, though, Selectwoman Perry, for our other committees, because I know, for instance, on the planning board, when there's a vacancy, they alternate between the two alternates each meeting as to who ends up stepping up as a voting member according to their bylaws.
is there
Go ahead.
an opportunity for me to make a motion for another person for this position?
Correct me if I'm wrong. We have a motion on the table that has been seconded. So I do not believe we entertain another motion until this one has been dealt with.
That's what I wasn't sure of, if they got entered in simultaneously or after one another. Thank you.
Does anyone disagree with my ruling on the question at hand? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on the motion on the table to approve Carol Aaron as as second alternate to the Budget Review Committee, term to expire June 30th, 2021? Hearing none, at this time I'll call for a roll call vote. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
No.
And I am a yes vote. The motion passes 3-0. I just want to take this time before we move on in our agenda to congratulate all of those who have either been reappointed and or appointed to serve on our town committees. I often say the heart of our work happens at the committee level, and the brain work happens at our committee level as well. And just want to thank you for putting yourselves out there, and congratulations to all those who were either reappointed and or appointed this evening. Any other comments before we move on to 9.2? Go ahead, Selectwoman Perry.
I believe you just said the vote was 3-0, but the vote was 3-1.
Thank you for correcting me. You are right. The motion to approve Carol Aaron for the second alternate position on the Budget Review Committee was a 3-1 vote, with myself, Mr. Daly, and Mr. Dolliver in favor, and with Ms. Perry dissenting. I appreciate that. Thanks, Lindsay. Okay, moving on to 9.2 on our agenda. We had hoped that when we put this agenda together that we would have our attorney has been asked to provide guidance regarding committee member and alternate terms, in particular because when we make motions, we motion for their end date. There was a discussion that happened at our last meeting that was in particular about the Budget Review Committee, and motions were made and the work moved forward based off of those motions. But there was some confusion if that applied to only the Budget Review Committee and or to all committees. And we have asked our town attorney to re-clarify and provide us with any further guidance. She did provide us with guidance late this afternoon, but to my knowledge, that guidance did not make it in our packet. So I would like to postpone or move this, table this agenda item until our next meeting, when we all can have a chance to see our attorney's opinion and have any opportunity for discussion after that at our next meeting. Is that okay with everyone? Okay. So do I have a motion to table 9.2 on our agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Selectman Dolliver. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Selectman Daly. Any further discussion? Okay. Roll call vote. John Daly,
Yes.
Rick Dolliver,
Yes.
Lindsay Perry,
Yes.
and I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0. Moving further under 9.3 of our agenda. And this is about committee application deadlines. And this was talked about earlier in public comment, and I agree. It's been a little messy is the way I will describe it. And I felt the need that we re-clarify our process and our deadline process. On the agenda, what we've put forward is that applicants for open committee member and alternate positions are due the Thursday before each regular scheduled select board meeting, the first and third Tuesday of each month. The select board will attempt to fill vacancies as soon as possible. If a vacancy is not filled, the deadline for applications is adjusted accordingly to the Thursday at noon before the next regular scheduled meeting. Do we have any discussion before entertaining a motion? Mr. Dolliver.
I would support this, but just as you said earlier, Mr. Chair, the email we got, they had spoken to somebody in the town hall. So, and it was turned in the next day. So in my opinion, if you spoke to somebody in the town hall, it was received at the time you spoke. So I don't want to change it. I think 9.3 is good, but in the rare occurrence that somebody speaks to somebody, whether it be Pat or Cheryl or Chris, and says it'll be there in the morning, and that person approves it, then they're in, they got it in by I don't know.
So I think what I'm attempting to do by putting this on the agenda for us to discuss was to clarify the process so it gives guidance to our town clerk and or who she may ask to step in for her if she's absent. It gives guidance for her to follow specifically regarding our process and the deadline process.
Okay.
Any other discussion before entertaining a motion? Okay. Do I have a motion to approve our application deadline process as stipulated on our agenda?
So moved.
So moved by Selectman Dolliver. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Selectman Daley. Any further discussion? All right, we'll take hearing no discussion. I'll do a roll call vote. John Daly, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
Yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. The motion passes 4-0. To the person who made public comment earlier, hopefully this clarifies a bit further some of our process, at least moving forward. Moving on to 9.4 on our agenda, we have discussed in past meetings that we would like to meet with committees on a regular basis to discuss any priorities as well as any other work that the committee might be doing. The goal here is that the select board and our committees be on the same page moving forward. I'd like to begin before scheduling any meetings, I wanted to hear from you all if there are any committees that you would like to meet with first. And I'd also like to say if there are any committees who would like to meet with us first, I'm asking committee chairs to contact me and let me know, hey, yes, we are one of those committees who would like to meet with you earlier rather than later. So with that said, does any member of the select board have any recommendations for which committees to meet with first? Selectwoman Perry.
I think we should definitely meet with the Parks and Rec Committee because a lot of the things they had planned for our 40th anniversary have had to be sort of downgraded and pushed. And I think that it'd be really great to get a new update from them and maybe even be a resource for them to ask what we can do to help their committee still flourish and celebrate our town the right way. So I'd really like to meet with them. I know that we've talked with them quite a bit because there's been tons going on still, but maybe there's more stuff that we can do to help them.
I'm in agreement as well. In addition, they've added a few things most recently. And in addition, I did have an opportunity to have a conversation with Jason, in particular about the 40th anniversary. And I believe he's thinking through some thoughts, and I believe he's going to be talking with Michelle and or any new chairs that they might appoint moving forward about coming to us with some recommendations about how to move forward with the planning of the 40th celebration next year. So I think that your suggestion is very timely. Any other suggestions? Mr. Dolliver.
I think meeting with all of them is pretty important, but we've got a few, you know, at least one email. I'd like to meet with the OHPC, have a discussion with them. I know there's a slight shakeup, and see where they're at and see if they need help.
Okay. Any other comments on meeting with OHPC? I too think this is timely. As the public knows, we had met with our attorney to discuss the scope of the work with OHPC, and I think having this meeting sooner rather than later. And I would also suggest that maybe a portion of that meeting we invite our town attorney for any questions that anyone has regarding their scope of work moving forward. Any other suggestions for which committees to meet with first? Mr. Dolliver.
Maybe the Cove Committee. It looks like, you know, with possible things down the road, with a bridge and a seawall and a dredging, maybe we need to meet with the Cove Committee. And, you know, I don't know a lot about the bridge and the seawall, but I know a lot about the dredging. So if something was to happen with the dredging, I mean, we'd need hopefully the Cove Committee to help coordinate moving boats. And so it's just another thought that maybe we should meet with them sooner than later.
Okay. Rick, when you say Cove Committee, I just, for the point of clarity, I believe you're talking about the Harbor Committee. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Is that
Harbor.
correct? Yep.
Yes.
All right.
Sorry.
Any other suggestions? All right, I will work with the committee chairs to see when might work for them and their committee and with our schedule. And as I said, if there are any committees out there who would really like to have a conversation with the select board sooner rather than later, please, the chair, please contact me and let me know. And I will work to put you on the agenda and on one of our agendas moving forward as well. I'd like to just go back up to, I'm not sure if it belongs under 9.1 or 9.2. And there was a question earlier this evening that for some people it feels a bit, and I'm summarizing what I heard, maybe it feels a bit arbitrary as to which committees we are appointing members at, and then some committees we haven't moved forward with. I just want to share, in the spirit of transparency, that those decisions as to what's put on the agenda, my process is, one, certainly if any select board member has an agenda request, I entertain that agenda request. Two, in looking at the committee appointments, our first time appointing people at our last regularly scheduled meeting, myself, the town manager, as well as Vice Chair John Daly did have a conversation about which were the committees of priority at that point in time. And we came to some consensus that those were the ones to immediately put on our agenda. For this last time, we went through each committee and evaluated some things. Some things like if we hadn't heard from somebody as to their intentions, if they plan to reapply or not, we decided to hold off until a conversation could happen either between Pat, myself, and or our town clerk, just ensuring that that person is no longer interested in serving on a committee. We felt like it was important to verify that information before putting it on the agenda and then missing them. The other thing that we took into consideration this last time is there have been recent resignations on the planning board and on the Ogunquit the Ogunquit Historic Preservation Commission. And we felt like it was important to give the public time to first learn about those vacancies, and or one person did not resign, they rescinded their application moving forward. So we wanted to give that some time before considering. On that consideration, as the public knows, there was a question on the table regarding if a member, if somebody can serve on both the planning board and OHPC, because OHPC advises or makes recommendations to the planning board. And so we were waiting on a decision from our town attorney on that. And I hope to have more information at our next meeting when I do plan to put those appointments on our agenda. So I just am trying to share with the select board and the public a bit of my process. This is my first time trying to do this. I'm trying to honor what has happened in the past, as well as honor any priorities and any unique needs moving forward as well. The other, there's one committee that we have a number of non-Ogunquit residents serving on the committee, but our town charter says that while we can have members who are not Ogunquit residents serve on our committees, a majority of people serving on our committees have to reside here in Ogunquit. Pat, correct me if I'm stating that, if you think I'm stating that wrong. And there's one committee that we don't have enough applicants to make that balance work. And we also don't want to insult any reappointment applicants by not reappointing them as well. And so, long story short, that was another example of a reason why that was not on our agenda for this evening. Are there any questions from select board members about my process as chair as to when to put appointments on the agenda, and or any feedback as to the things that I've shared with you all this evening? Mr. Dolliver.
Just quickly, thank you, because however you guys do it, it's been working perfect. Because if we did them all tonight, we'd be here until midnight, you know? So thank you. I mean, this seems long, but you know, you're making me realize there's a lot more committees out there that we still have to go over. So I think it's always been done that way. We spread them out over time, but I honestly can't remember. But
Thank you. Any other comments? Any feedback for me as chair? Okay, thank you all. I appreciate you entertaining that. Next up is 9.5, and this is board committee commission training. So we have a responsibility to ensure that our committee members are provided training as to their responsibilities, as well as to particular laws like the Freedom of Access Act and our Code of Ethics. And so our town attorney has agreed to provide a training for all of our board, committee, commission members. The beauty of technology is that can be done and be made easily accessible to hopefully everyone. And certainly the general public is welcome to join that training. I've reached out to our town attorney to find a date that works for her. And as soon as we have a date, we will certainly put it out to the public. I'm hoping that there's plenty of notice for people to put it on their calendars. The other thing that I believe is with Zoom, we'll be able to record it and it can be available for viewing later if somebody is not able to make the time. Any other comments on that from the select board? All right, hearing none. 9.6, Code of Ethics. So we heard some comments this evening, and Selectman Dolliver, you brought up a couple of things as well. The advice from our town attorney at this point in time, given the reappointments, new appointments, et cetera, is this can be a time for us as a select board to send a reminder of our code of ethics to all of our members, including our new members, and to ask them to read the code of ethics, certainly reach out if they have any questions and ask them to sign off on the code of ethics. Just an opportunity, an education opportunity, hey, we hear and we have heard as a select board, we've received some emails and discussions have happened regarding some complaints where some people believe folks may not be following our code of ethics. There was a public comment made earlier this evening. And so this is just sort of a, let's hit the restart button and starting from now, hey, we're all sort of coming on board and going to be on the same page moving forward as best as we can. So I'm hoping that the select board agrees with our attorney's advice to send that out to our committee members. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, hearing none, I'm not going to take a vote on this, but I would like just consensus that everyone is comfortable with us moving forward with sending the code of ethics out to all of our members and asking them to read it, highlighting any areas of particular significance and asking for people to let us know if they have any questions, as well as to sign off on the code of ethics and submit that to our town clerk. Is everyone in agreement? Lindsay's got thumbs up, John Daly has thumbs up, and I see Mr. Dolliver shaking his head yes, and I too am in agreement. So we'll move forward with that. Thank you all. Any comments any other comments or discussion on the 9.0 under new business, appointments to town committees and boards? All right, moving on. Now we have 10.0, which is another opportunity for the public to provide comment. This is, again, we have been allowing for, at this point, public comment at the beginning of our meeting and again at the end of our meeting. The select board welcomes public comments and questions about agenda items and town-related matters. And we ask that people keep comments brief and to the point, under 3 minutes. We also ask that if you have a complaint or concern, it would be most helpful to us if you also offer a solution or solutions. With that, Tom, do we have anyone who would like to provide public comment?
Yep, Barbara or Pat.
So Barbara and Pat, you reminded me of a conversation that I had with the town manager, and that's our people, given the fact that we're allowing comments at the beginning of our meeting and allowing comments at the end of our meeting, are people allowed to comment twice? And since the select board hasn't made a decision on that, I will allow public comment to happen twice, but it is something I'm hoping we discuss as a select board when we review our rules in our upcoming workshop. So just wanted to make that statement. So Barbara or Pat, if you want to just reintroduce yourself. And
Barbara Ferraro, Barbara Ferraro, Ocean Heights, and I did give a solution tonight and it was not accepted. The majority again showed tonight that your actions regarding the Budget Review Committee were nothing but political. And you're very inconsistent because you didn't put Peter in last time, you said, because he lost the race. But let me remind you that Carol Aaron also lost her race and you put her in. Moving forward, I don't think so. Accepting differences, working together, I don't think so. You didn't show that tonight. And with all due respect, I want to address Mr. Pack, Administrator and Vice Chair of the Planning Board. Please refrain from your sarcasm and petty reminders of voting results. You never heard these comments from either the past majority or any of us when you lost the majority votes and you lost the recall. I ask you to look at your actions and words and stop your bullying online. We all have a right to speak what we want to speak. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Barbara. We appreciate them.
Elaine, you should be able to unmute.
Good evening. This is Elaine Cooper. I am at Spring Street. First of all, I'd like to thank the Select Board. I appreciate your attempting to make all these clarifications to the issues that are on the agenda and to the processes and everything. I know it's difficult for people to get into the swing of things when you're new, so there is a learning curve, and I appreciate your attempts this evening. I'd also like to thank the people who are willing to make public comments and trying to get issues come up that are important to them to be clarified. I don't see those being badgering. I see people trying to get answers to those questions. And I also saw people trying to offer suggestions tonight, which is a great thing. I said, if we're going to get change, people can bring up a comment, but having a solution is a great option to add to that. Third, I'd like to again, thank all the people who have applied for and been appointed to committees because their ideas, experiences, backgrounds, energy, and willingness to volunteer are an important cog in what makes the wheel of Ogunquit go round. I would, however, like to see if I could get a clarification because I believe tonight you inadvertently put a person on, and I have no problems with your putting the person on. I have no issues with them serving, but I believe Glenn Delatetsky, you tonight put him on two quasi-municipal boards, the Board of Assessment Review and the Zoning Board. And by our charter, you are not allowed to serve on two of those. So I just wanted to make that you aware of that so we don't have an issue coming down if the Board of Assessment Review ever meets. Thank you for allowing me to speak and have a great evening.
Thank you, Elaine, for your comments. And I feel like it's important to highlight that actually the addition on our agenda under public comments where we've put that we also ask that if you have a complaint or concern, it would be most helpful if you also offer a solution or solutions. That recommendation actually came from Elaine Cooper. So again, thank you.
Rick, you should be able to unmute.
Rick, I believe we can hear you.
Rick Delabernarda or Rick Dolliver?
Hi. There's two Rick Dollivers. That's amazing.
Okay, no, I'm sorry. This is Rick Delabernarda, 257 Berwick Road. And maybe I missed it. I apologize for being late. So can you give a definition between what a board is, a committee is, and a task force is, and how many we have of each within this town? And I think there's actually even subcommittees. I was just curious.
Thank you for your comments, Rick. And the town manager is working on with her team to update all of our boards, committees, and commissions, as well as putting more information on our website. And definitely, I think it may be very helpful to get some clarification on the differences moving forward. So we'll definitely get back to you with an answer. Tom, do we have any other comments?
It looks like Rick might have some follow-up or another question. I had already disabled him.
Generally, we only allow for one time, but since I allowed somebody else twice, and I don't believe Rick used his full 3 minutes, go ahead, Rick.
I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Dollar.
I don't know if it's appropriate, but I'm on the town website, and just to answer his question, if you go into boards and committees, it said boards, select board, planning board, zoning board of appeals, board of assessment review, Wells Ogunquit, CSD. Committees, like pedestrian, budget review, harbor, heritage, recycling, marginal way, parks and rec, performing arts, sustainability. Commissions, charter review, conservation, historic preservation, shellfish. I think that's it. I think they're right there.
I think there is a few missing, and maybe I misheard, but I think sustainability is not there.
Sustainability's here.
Okay, so it sounds like, Pat, your process with your team is working because things are getting updated on the website. So thank you. And I think if I understood Rick's question, he would really like to understand, why do we call some things boards? Why do we call some things committees? And why do we call some things commissions? And I don't even want to attempt to answer that tonight. I have a sense of what it is, but I think it would be better for us to have something that is verified to be fully accurate. Tom, it looks like we have somebody else with their hand raised.
Jim, you should be able to unmute.
Yes, can you hear me?
We can, Jim.
Yeah, I'd like to just quickly pick up where I left off on the initial comments. I remember when Rick was talking about how everybody was sort of trying to find their common ground as a board. And I think I left out that not only Rick, but John Daly served under Barbara Daly during the period of Tom Fortier's tenure as town manager in Ogunquit, through that tumultuous period of which he had to be relieved of his position as town manager of Ogunquit for the improprieties that were very clearly pointed out. There was a comment about getting this board up and running and feeling comfortable from one of the commenters, and I honestly have to question, did the two of you actually share with the new chairman a lot of the rules and procedures associated with becoming a select board member? I find that really kind of intriguing. And the last thing is, there was a commenter who came on who talked about bringing up history. Well, if you eliminate history and you tear down statues in this country and you burn books, I really think that by eliminating history, you don't have a platform on which to move forward. So I don't understand where that commenter was coming from. We learn by history, we learn by our mistakes, and we look forward to improving upon those mistakes and moving this town forward. I didn't see a lot of that tonight. And I think it's bothersome when we talk about people who are so qualified for committee positions and are denied that opportunity through relationships of the board with other people. It's very upsetting. I hope we can move beyond this. I hope that we can start looking at things in a different perspective. I think the chairman talked about the election being a referendum to change. But Mr. Chairman, I would ask in the subsequent meeting that you define what that change is, what your vision is for this community, because right now it's very questionable as what direction you're taking us in. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you, Jim. Our workshop coming up next is going to start that discussion. So thank you.
And there are no hands raised.
All right. Moving on to 11.0, select board comments. Are any select board members who would like to provide comment this evening? Mr. Dolliver.
How are you this fine day? I just want to not really respond to some statements, but I just want to be on the record. I have never said publicly or privately anything about the election as to a reason why somebody is not appointed to a committee, or I've never said that. Here's what I will tell you. I've been bullied a lot since 2016. Anonymous things in the mail, bogus videos made about me. And you know what I did? I took a year off and then I ran and I pulled my papers and I ran a clean campaign. I don't have social media, so I wasn't online. I didn't make any videos. I didn't stand in front of the post office. I ran a clean, honest campaign. And you know what? I've worked with some of these people on different committees. I was liaisons to committees that people worked on. And the hard truth is, I have a right as a select board member to vote for or against whomever I want to, whom I think the constituents and the majority in the town of Ogunquit believe in. And that's my opinion. And I vote how I think the majority of the people in Ogunquit believe. I'm sorry if you don't agree with my opinion. I don't necessarily agree with everybody's opinion, but that doesn't make us bad people. It shouldn't make us hate each other. But I have reasons why I did not appoint, and it has nothing to do with an election. Nobody's asked me my opinion, and I don't have to volunteer it. And if I did, I would invite that person and I would have that conversation as directed by what I feel is the right way to do it. I know we're not all going to agree. I get it. I would just hope that the large majority of people have a vision for Ogunquit in the future. Not today, not last week, and not tomorrow. I'm talking the long-term future. And I'm hoping that the large majority have that same vision. That's it. I guess I'm done.
Thank you, Selectman Dolliver. Selectman Daley, go ahead.
I'll be quick. It's great we're having these conversations about ethics again. We have them every year, at least for the last 4 or 5 years. I'm glad that the chair is pushing to have the committees and the commissions and boards, other boards read the ethics and sign off on it. But I just want to know, this probably doesn't have to be said, but also every person in this community has a code of ethics too they should be living by. We're held to a higher standing because we're elected or we're appointed, but everyone in this community has ethics they should be adhering to, not just the people who are elected or appointed. Thank you.
Thank you, Selectman Daley. Selectwoman Perry.
Hi, thank you. I just want to, sorry, I'm losing my voice right now. I want to call attention to the more than 100 wildfires that are burning across the United States, specifically on the West Coast. Thousands and thousands of acres are burning. People's homes and lives are at stake, as well as so many creatures of wildlife. So I really hope that if there's any way that you can help or donate to Red Cross or any other organizations that are helping people that are suffering right now, please do so. I also want to send my positivity to those students that are starting up school, whether it is through Zoom or some of the private universities, colleges, and schools that are actually going back in person. There's one of my best friends has her son is a new kindergartner, and this is very scary time. And my heart goes out to parents that are seeing their kids start their school year, and it's all going to really be starting to happen this month and next month. So if you are a parent or have a child in your life and you're experiencing that, our positivity is with you. And then last but not least, I want to call attention to the fact that August 26th is National Women's Equality Day. So I hope that you can celebrate women in your life nationally and internationally on that day. Thank you. You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Selectwoman Perry. Appreciate everyone's comments this evening. I don't have any further comments to add. With that, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move, so move.
So moved by Selectman Daley. Do I have a second?
Second,
Second by Selectman Dolliver. I'm going to call a roll call vote. John Daley, how do you vote?
Yes.
Rick Dolliver, how do you vote?
yes.
Lindsay Perry, how do you vote?
Yes.
And I too am a yes vote. Motion passes 4-0. The select board is now going to take a brief break. I want to recognize that it is just a little after 8, and we're going to come back together for a workshop. Given the time, one of the first things I'll just ask the select board members to think about is sort of, do we want to set an end time? Because there's quite a bit to discuss, and based off of what we would discuss, we could be here all night. And so just thinking about, let's set an end time as we begin our workshop. So let's take 5 minutes. It's 8:08. Let's come back at 8:15 p.m. For the public, just want to remind you all that we're going to be here on Zoom, and you'll be able to hear our discussion this evening. Thank you. Hi, Rick. It's 8:15. Let's just give John and Lindsay hopefully another minute or two. John, we see you joined us, and we're just going to give Lindsay another minute to sign on. There she is. All right, let's get started with, it is 8:16, and we'll start the workshop. This is a time for us as select board members to have open conversation and discussion. There will be no votes taken during our workshop. The goal is to have discussion, see where there may be consensus, and determine how we might want to move forward. All the items we're going to discuss tonight will eventually, when they're ready, be put on our actual meeting agendas, and public comment will be allowed. And then votes will be taken, assuming there are any changes moving forward. My intent is that I'm hoping, while I still am hoping that decorum can be held by all of us, I also feel like we can have the best open discussion, and that means I don't have to necessarily call on you if it's your time and you're ready. Feel free to jump in, as all I ask is that we not interrupt each other. I will only step in as chair if I feel like we should rein things back in, so to speak. Any questions before we dive in? Mr. Dolliver, Rick.
Rick's perfect. Would anybody entertain trying to set a time frame here, and at least, some rough estimate, midnight?
I'm hoping not for midnight. Yes, that was going to be my next question for everyone is there a time frame that you all would like to stick within? It is almost 8:20.
1 hour, is that possible?
I think that's a good time frame. Does everyone else agree?
Yeah, no more than that. That'd be fine with me.
Okay, so with that, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 items. So I'd like to give each about 10 minutes, give or take. And so that means we're not going to get through all of these items, but this is an opportunity for us to just sort of say what we need to say. I will probably take some documents page by page just to say, hey, are there any comments on this page? And I'll see how things are going. I also want to acknowledge that Bob is not here tonight, and so I anticipate that we'll schedule another workshop, because I would like to at least have the opportunity for all 5 of us to weigh in the workshop format before we move it to our actual formal meeting format. So with that, let's move to the Code of Ethics. So there are 2 Code of Ethics. They're fairly similar, but a little bit different. There's the Code of Ethics for us as a Board of Selectmen and Selectwomen. And then there is a Code of Ethics for all of our other town committee boards, etc. In our packet, excuse me, I'm pulling it up now. It is the first one is our Code of Ethics for us as a select board. So let's discuss that one tonight. And so starting with page 1, which is the preamble and number 1, are there any comments? Okay, and I guess the best way for us to do it, if you have no comments, if you want to just give a thumbs up, i.e. you're good, and we can move on to the second page. That would be most helpful in our process to me, so that I don't have to keep asking. So any comments on page 1, or are you good? All right, we're good. Moving on to page 2, which covers compliance with the law, conduct of members, respecting the process, and conduct of public meetings. Any comments on this particular page? All right, I think everyone is good. Page 3, which finishes the conduct of public meetings. Decisions being based off of merit, communication, and begins to discuss conflict of interest. Are there any comments? All right, moving on to page 4, which further clarifies conflict of interest and gets into gifts and favors and confidential information. And just so you all know, I'm letting my dogs inside. Go ahead, John.
I don't know if I want to change anything. I guess I got to read a little closer than I did last night. But a conflict of interest is a little confusing for me in this town. Every time I vote on anything, it affects somehow me. I vote for make a private road a public road, anything to do with plowing, anything to do with taxes. If I vote for a budget for the police department, it affects me. So some people like to throw a conflict of interest so easily. Every time we vote on something, it could be a conflict because it affects my tax rate. It puts more money in my pocket, takes money out of my pocket if I vote for stuff. So I don't know, I'm just a little confused by this whole conflict of interest thing. I think it really should come down to the person who's being questioned, they decide. Because otherwise I can pick up I can pick something up that every single one you voted on that I can say is a conflict. If you use a broad approach other than like a financial conflict. I mean, financial conflict is an easy one. Like I do this, you give me that. But there's a lot of other things that it's just confusing for me. That's all. I'm not saying change anything, but just want to share my confusion with this conflict of interest area in such a small town.
I'm in agreement too, John. I think this area could benefit all of us, particularly for the future, if it could be cleaned up with a bit more guidance. The law, if I understand the state law, it really talks about that financial conflict of interest. The code of ethics makes that a little bit more broad. And I think really kind of clarifying our intent or our hope moving forward would be most helpful. I also, the other day, heard of I can't remember the word now. Sorry, maybe Pat, maybe you remember the word. Mary said, not a financial conflict of interest, but there was another term that she used in a conversation. Anyhow, it might be worth following up with her to see if she has any guidance for us as well.
And on top of that, most of us know a lot of people. So anyone who comes before us that we have to make a vote on, we know the person. Isn't that a conflict then when we're voting on someone we know? So I think as long as we're not biased and do what we think is right deep down in our heart, that's the way it should go. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
If I could, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
I agree with you, John. It's from my time on the board before, conflict of interest generally, as a huge majority, is financial. But the other part of that is a bias. If you cannot make a decision because of a bias, then you must disclose it. The board discusses and votes, but it's that select board member that would bring that up. And And that's more, I don't think a conflict. I think it would be more of an appearance of a conflict, which we may see sooner than later. But through workshops with legal, it was always, it's that board member's responsibility to bring up the appearance or the conflict. And at that point, then the board can discuss and vote if they determine. But generally speaking, it's all about money. And to your point, John, yeah, I mean, if we were to vote on a CIP, yeah, it affects everybody's pocket, but quite honestly, that's your job. So there's a differentiation there between voting on budgets or projects and a financial gain or loss, because it's a financial gain or loss in theory, straight across the board to everybody. This is, do you award your brother-in-law the contract to do the plowing? That's, or the paving. But I agree, it could be cleaned up a little. But I'm going to assume, and that's a bad word, that it's probably goes along the lines of most of them in other towns. And it's probably pretty straight as to the legal basis of code of ethics and appearance.
Thanks for your comments, Rick. Lindsay?
So there's a line in here that that says, additionally, any member who believes that any fellow member has an actual or appearance of conflict of any agenda item before their collective body shall disclose that interest. And so that is in relation to if we feel that a board member has a conflict of interest, it's in our duty to bring that up in a public meeting, correct? So in doing so, it also harkens back to one of our items above this, which says to not assume motives, things like that so I think the wording there is interesting, because if that board member doesn't feel that that's an important thing for another board member to bring up, are you then violating that prior issue of suggesting a motive? I do think that it is fair for other board members to be given the allowance to bring up conflict of interest, but in the way that we do that, I think it's worth taking a deeper dive into.
Some very good points there. Any other discussion on conflict of interest for this evening? Okay, any other comments on page 4? Okay, moving on, hearing none, moving on to page 5. Use of public resources, representation of third-party interests, advocacy, policy roles of members. For me, number 12 is interesting because so I have a conversation with a constituent who thinks we should, I don't know, start a committee or do something. And I'm in agreement with that person and I bring it forward. Am I, in essence, bringing forward the interest of that third party? John?
I read, maybe I'm reading it differently than you, maybe wrong. I read that a select board member can't go in front of the planning board. It can't go in front of the Shellfish Commission. We can't go in front of other boards. That's how I read it, but maybe I'm reading it wrong.
I agree with you, Joe.
But our job is to bring things forward. Like if Heath has someone who brings something to you, Heath, I think you can bring it forward if you believe in it. Even if you don't, you can say, hey, my neighbor said this, I don't agree with him, but I want the board to weigh in. But I just think that you just can't represent, you can't go in front of other boards, is how I read it. That's it. Thank you.
As you're saying that, I see, as I read on, it sort of makes that clear, but maybe the first sentence could be reworked a little bit to make it clear from the get-go as to what we're really talking about. Or maybe we say representation of third-party interests on other town boards and committees or something to that effect, just to clarify what we're talking about.
I think that's it, Mr. Chair. If you read it right there, it said the interests of third parties before any town board. If you said any other town board,
yeah,
committee or commission shall not appear. I think just the word any, because John's right. I mean, if Bob Smith comes to you with a concern or a complaint or something that, that's our job is to get it on an agenda, discuss it, and convince our other board members either for or against what policy or procedure we're talking about.
Great. Any other questions on page 5? Page 6, independence of boards, committees, and commissions, positive workplace environment, implementation, compliance, and enforcement.
Mr. Chair, I think 15 is relative to 12. But I just think it's, you shall refrain from using your position to unduly influence deliberations. And I think that's what 12 is alluring to, that we should not only unduly influence, but we really shouldn't be in front of that board advocating for or against something at a planning board meeting, we'll say. I don't think, but maybe ask legal. Which we'll get into later, but I would call MMA and ask myself, but I can't at the present time.
I struggle with this a little bit because, well, I think I understand the intent, because in essence, any decisions made along the way show up here. Committees make recommendations to us, etc. Ultimately, if there are appeals and whatnot. And I think that's the intent behind it. But at times, whether or not we're a liaison to a committee, or we may be able to just provide, say one thing at a committee that might help them. And I struggle with that.
You
attended
can.
a, go ahead.
I think if you read it, Mr. Chair, members shall refrain from using their positions to unduly influence. There's a big difference between if you're a liaison and the committee asks you for your opinion and your thoughts and concerns, and you give them, and they agree with it or disagree with it. I think what this means is, hey, can I get your thoughts and opinions? And I give it, and they disagree with it. And then if I was to say, well, I mean, if you want to get reappointed, or if you want this to happen, you should see this way, that's unduly influencing. But to just give your opinion, it doesn't have to be accepted. It could be declined, but that's not unduly. But again, that's unduly would be a legal term. I would have to look up.
That's helpful to me. But I agree with you, maybe just clarification on is that the right word? And or is there any additional clarification that might help in that situation where we're asked our opinion? Any other questions on page 6?
Well, I looked up the definition and it doesn't really help me. To an unwarranted degree. I guess, yeah, there is no need to be unduly alarmed. Yeah, I guess so. So I would stand with my first statement.
All right. Page 7.
Here's the only question I would ask with page 7. Is this the latest version? If this is the latest version, I'm not sure why my name's there. But hey,
I hear you. I believe I remember signing it, I think back in November or December.
okay, so it's not the latest version. That's important.
So good comment. Go ahead, John.
Page 7, I brought this up in the past and didn't go anywhere, and it probably won't go anywhere again, and that's fine. But I don't feel I'm doing my duty if I don't bring it up. As far as 18, it starts on page 6, but pretty much is on page 7. Compliance and enforcement. So on page 7, the second to last paragraph from the bottom talks about when a member violation is apparent as prescribed in this code of ethics, the actions taken may range from a letter of reprimand to a censure to request of resignation. I almost think that if you're really going to put teeth on these ethics, you almost have to add if a vote of a majority plus 1 to vote them off the board. You know, I don't know if that's legal. Maybe it's not. Maybe because we're all voted in by the residents. Maybe we can't vote another member out. But so if it's illegal, it's illegal, and it's a done issue. I almost think we should at least consider talking about, do we add that in so it puts more teeth in it? Vote for them, why you can vote another select person off.
I believe our town charter actually provides a provision around the reasons why someone may be no longer on the board. And I believe there is a line in there that talks about there can be a vote taken. I can't remember if it requires majority plus 1, but certainly we could look into it.
Mr. Chair, it is in the charter. And to John's point, charter trumps code of ethics. So in theory, it's in the code of ethics, but to have it hard written there can't hurt.
I think having any alignment between the documents just
helps.
You know, it helps support each document, so to speak. And I agree with your comment, Rick, that the town charter is law. This code of ethics is sort of falls, I guess the best way to say it is, from my perspective, falls underneath the town charter.
To my recollection, isn't this the piece that we worked on last year, that we did put more parameters in as a temporary charter change until the charter commission could work on it more in depth, and that it didn't, it's not reflected here because it's an area that we plan on working on as a town, which would involve a more strict reasoning for members to leave the board. Right now, it matches the state's provisions that default to the state.
I think you're referencing the recall language, which the recall language is more about citizens, taxpayers, voters if they want somebody removed from the select board.
Right, but
versus-
wouldn't it lead into why we, where there would be a removal?
But there's a whole nother section underneath the select board section that talks about the parameters. I think if you have so many unexcused meetings, it's actually implied that you're automatically off the board. If you, I think
Have been convicted of a crime.
there's another language
You must
about
resign, all
Yep.
these. If I could, the only thing with Lindsay's comment there is if the past board did discuss any of this, I would still go back and ask, is this the latest version? Because if you guys talked about it and it wasn't changed or anything, I would just expect to see one of these signed sometime in 19 with different signatures.
Yeah, I agree, Rick, that I want to make sure this is the most up-to-date version, but I don't believe that we made any changes to it last year. This was a pretty cut and dry thing last year.
That's my recollection too, but I agree we should just get the most recent copy. All right, any overall comments? We've spent about 20 minutes instead of 10 minutes on this, but that's all right. We got through it for this round. I have two overall comments. One is just in general, when we disagree with a vote, etc., there are varying opinions as to whether or not you're allowed to voice that, minority opinion, whether or not you're able to share, disagreements. And for some people, there's a belief that if you're disagreeing with the majority vote, that you're somehow disparaging the majority, those who voted in the majority, et cetera. And I just think I would like a little bit more clarity there, and certainly can take a look at it and offer up a suggestion that might help to really clarify. There's a difference when, in my opinion, there's a difference when you're sharing your opinion and it may differ from the majority, and what the parameters are around that, so that it allows for all opinions to be able to be voiced. But it doesn't suggest that just because you're voicing your opinion that you're somehow disparaging the opinion of the majority, etc. The other overall comment that I have is, I think strengthening the language of when there's a complaint, when any one of us have a concern with another board member, sort of describing that process, which refers back to what we talked about earlier in this meeting, or earlier in our meeting prior, which is the advice that the attorney's given around the Freedom of Access Act. And that I think just sort of spelling out what's the process, who do you contact, when do you contact them, etc., would be helpful guidance. And I believe the other one is, what if you have a concern about a town employee? In my opinion, that's you take your concern to the town manager, and then she works that process, because there's a sort of a line there where we don't get involved with town employees directly. Okay, any other overall comments before we move on? Okay, select board rules. Right, so I'm going to take these one at a time. Number one, the right to know. So I would just like some clarification if we agree with this fully. So for instance, when we have meetings for executive session only, technically the beginning of the meeting and the end of the meeting, when we go into executive session and when we come out of executive session, are public. And so I know this is except for executive sessions, but we have not been at times streaming the beginning and end of those meetings when the whole purpose is to go into executive session. So again, if we keep up with what we've been practicing, and then I think some clarity there might help. The other is, I think like last year, the select board did have some more workshops. I think they were workshop sessions that were more about how you all work together. And sometimes you went into executive session, sometimes the select board didn't go into executive session, but those were not aired. And so I think we just should clear up how we want to do, what we want to do moving forward. Any thoughts on that? Rick?
I mean, if the purpose is to go into executive session, and I mean, I know one side will attack or the other side will attack, but I mean, if the purpose is to go into executive session to discuss labor contracts, I think it's crazy to have Jordan set everything up or whomever, record it for 3 minutes, then sit around for God knows how long. And then, so common practice would tell you we don't do that. And I think you're right, Mr. Chair. Under right to know, number one, maybe it could be cleaned up to explain that better. But if the majority feels it should be, then so be it. I just think it's fleecing taxpayer dollars for something that we don't need to do. Nothing's being hidden. Everything is full transparency. It's just you didn't televise going in and coming out. If there's a vote after, which we've had before, and we knew full well going into executive session that you're meeting with legal and you come out of executive session and you're going to have action, then it has to be recorded. It should be. But there's a differentiation there that's pretty black and white.
I'm in agreement with your comments. John?
I'm coming from a different perspective. These board rules were made up, I think 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I think they're a waste. 90% of what you see in these board rules are in a charter or in some other document in town. So 90% is just someone just picked and chose what they want to put on here. It's not an official document. No one's ever signed it. And I personally would like to rip it up and just go by the charter and all the other policies and procedures and guidelines we have. As far as going into executive sessions, as example, there's always other Robert's rules. There's other things that tell us how to do that. We don't need a three-page piece of paper that a board 2 or 3 years ago came up with to summarize things that from all these other pieces of paper. But again, I'm not going to be a stick in the mud. If everyone wants to support these, I'll support it. I have no recommended changes. I'll support it if you guys want, but I think it's a waste of paper.
Thanks, John. Rick?
To John's point, it's not 3 pages, John, it's 6. I have some issues with it, and I did when it passed. But I completely thought it was I hate to use the word waste of time, but I think there are things in here that are absolutely unconstitutional. And if we were ever challenged in court, we would have lost. I don't think it protects the town. I agree that the town charter, if there's a discrepancy between the charter and these rules, the charter trumps anyway. So I don't want to say I want to rip it up, but there's definitely some major changes I would like to see. And John just did.
John, you know Nancy Pelosi.
Fact.
On that note, I don't know yet. I feel like I want us to go through the document before I fully, I too have some concerns. And at times I too question, like, okay, we've got how many documents to follow, and it makes it very confusing. And we'll see what moving forward, what the town charter does. That said, the rules can help for consistency. In particular, our board changes over at least once a year. There's a new member elected, or sometimes it's not a new member, sometimes it's somebody who gets reelected, but for the most part, there's changeover on a yearly basis of some sort. And so with that, I think the rules help to create some level of consistency as changes occur. But as we're discussing tonight, these things can be changed as well. So long story short, I'm on the fence if we need these or not, but I think I'll have a better answer once we get through them. Any discussion on number 2, rules of order and following Robert's rules of order? All right, number 3, regular meetings and workshops.
Mostly repetitive from the charter.
Okay, any other comments? So for me, the middle paragraph, the deadline of 4 p.m. on Friday. I understand the intent behind this, and I agree with the intent behind this, but I think we've been maybe successful 50% of the time over at least the last year. So, and I know I've had conversations with Pat. We've been meeting on Thursdays, but then it feels like we're not, my concern is then she's working till late, 1 a.m. on Thursday morning to get it back to me for Friday morning. And then I've got to get it back to her, et cetera. And so, I mean, we've been talking about trying to meet maybe a little bit earlier to work that out. But I just feel like, look, if we're not, if we're missing the boat that much, then, either we need to adjust this deadline, and or if everyone thinks, yes, that's a deadline, then we need to figure out how to meet it. Thoughts?
I think that's too late. It should be the day before. It should be Thursday, 4 p.m., not Friday.
So you think it should be even earlier?
Yeah. Pat should have a full day to wrap things up. It's ridiculous because she has to have it out to the board by, I think, Friday by 5 p.m.
John, you're missing it.
This says that it should come to us as the board by 4 p.m. on Friday.
Oh, yeah, it always has in the past. I mean, not always, but historically it's been often. I remember the police department used to deliver it to my house every Friday afternoon when neighbors started to start rumors, actually. Yeah, I think I'd like to have it for, Friday afternoon, maybe not by 4, but just I guess before midnight, just so I have the week, Saturday and Sunday to review it, and Monday night. I don't need Thursday night and Friday night to review it.
Well, I pseudo agree with John, but I think we're on opposite. I'd love to have it for the weekend. If you get it on Monday or sometimes even Tuesday, I mean, in the old days, I had it, Cheryl printed it for me because I took notes on it. And when it's that fat, but it's a lot of stuff to compile too.
Lindsay?
Is it okay if Pat weighs in on this?
Absolutely.
Pat, do you have any thoughts on this in particular? Since it has a lot to do with you.
everything.
Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, my mouse was not cooperating. I think that the select board needs to have the agenda packet before the weekend so you can review it. I think if there can be some understanding that what you receive by, we've used 4 o'clock because that's close of business for the town office. So you hope that Cheryl is able to complete everything and go home at 4 o'clock, and we're able to post it at the post office. As long as there can be some leeway that, we got 99% of this stuff in there, but things can happen, things that people want more information before then that we're not aware of, and that we're going to change it. Like the one today, I mean, there were some changes and we didn't get all the changes done as we would have liked. So I think as long as there's some give and take, that it doesn't have to be the perfect document, but you're not changing it substantively before 48 hours before the meeting. I think the select board wants to have a completed agenda, for the weekend. I don't think there's any question about that. And I think that we try to do that. But I do think there needs to be a recognition if there are things that come up, like today. We didn't have, some of the attorneys' opinions ready for the packet. Does that mean we don't send it out with that on there because we don't have it? Or do we give ourselves some leeway that might arrive in time for you to have digested it? So, I think staying at 4 o'clock on Friday is just practical because that's when we close for business and Cheryl puts the agenda together. I just think it needs to be understood. And then the other part of this is there's a big production, not only for the agenda paper copy, the official copy, but then on the website. So Jordan has to get that all put together as well. So there is no easy button for putting the agenda together. So we try to get it ready for 4 o'clock because that gives you all the opportunity. You all have lives. You're not going to have to read it, Sunday morning to be ready for it. But I do think there needs to be some forgiveness, I guess I would say, in terms of it is not perfect and there are things that need to be added and they're legitimately after deadline and it makes sense for us to add them, then that is okay. If you don't feel that you've had enough time to review something, you table it. So you can think about it in terms of what your lives are like, frankly. There's you all have to look at it. I think the public likes to have it for the weekend to review as well.
I agree. It sounds like we'd like to leave the 4 p.m. Friday deadline there. And I think on the leeway, I would like to see at least, if there are changes, at least 24 hours notice or 48 hours notice would be best, but that there are minimal changes and not substantial changes. I think that would be most helpful. But at the same time, we all know sometimes something has to get approved and waiting another 2 weeks does not work. Okay, any other comments on number 3?
No, thanks, Pat, for weighing in.
Thank you.
Case number 4, special and emergency meetings.
Again, I think it's pseudo repetitive and meeting notification requirements are pursuant to state statute. Don't we always have to follow state statute? So to John's point and half of my point, and I'm not sure where the other 2 are, a lot of this is completely reiterating,
My comment on number 4 is I would like to see that if at least 2 members want to meet, that we meet. There was a situation that happened this past winter where I wanted to meet, and I was in the minority, and I'm not sure. When you're in the minority, that did not feel fair. But I'm certainly open to what you all think as well.
I think I'd like a legal opinion on that, because I don't know if that takes away from the word democracy. And if it's 2 members, why couldn't 1? I don't know where it would end. So I don't know. I mean, I know, and as we get closer to the ones I'm really concerned with, it's my understanding, I was there when we voted on these. Yes, they're select board rules. Yes, we ask people to follow them. But if it's not legal, what are we doing? You know, we're just opening ourselves for litigation and losses.
Okay. Any other thoughts on number 4? All right, number 5, requests for agenda items.
Any select board member should be able to request an agenda item, and it should be on the agenda. And that's what it should say. If you're going to have this document, it should be, and I'm not going to get personal, but you know, there's no repercussions or there haven't been. If somebody wants an agenda item and you don't get a return email and you just get nothing, and then it just never comes up, and there's nothing you can do.
Well, I mean, I think as it's written, that shouldn't be the case. It's just saying that the chairperson of the board needs to make sure that there's all the support needed for the item requested to be on the agenda. So I feel like if you take that away, you diminish the process, and you could put a lot of people, you know, in a desperate position, or we might not be bringing the full material. The way it's written is fine, to be honest with you, but I see what you're saying. Like, yeah, it should be talked about, but the way it's written, what you said shouldn't be the case. So if you need clarifying language, maybe put in a time limit.
So let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
If I send Heath an email and say, I want to talk about this at a meeting.
Yeah.
Here's all supporting documents. And then he never responds to me, or he just ignores me. And then I do it again. And then Heath gets replaced by John. And I send it to John. And I say, I want to talk about this. I want it as an agenda item. This number 5 does nothing for me.
Well, like I said, if you put in a timeline, it would.
My point is if I bring it to the attention of the board, and nothing happens, then what? That's why, to me, it's simple. All select board requests for agenda items should happen. That's
I'm inclined to go that direction, Rick, because if, you know, I agree, you as a select board member need to provide the supporting documents. And certainly I think this gets at, though, if it needs staff time. And I think this is what it's about, is about respecting staff time, because there are some agenda items that require staff time. And maybe there's a delineation that we make that honors a bit of a process if it involves staff time, versus if you, Rick Dolliver, want to do all the preparation and put everything together. Honestly, if you come forward with an agenda item and you're not prepared, then I would think that the board wouldn't be ready to vote for what you're asking for. versus if you're fully prepared and have provided everything, then hopefully, you've talked about, hey, you see part of your job as convincing the rest of us. I also think it adds a lot of ambiguity in the sense of the chairperson sort of gets to make the call if they think you have enough support, if you have done your due diligence, so to speak. And I'm not sure that that's fair either. So maybe there's a bit of a balance there, particularly when it involves staff time. The other thing is, and this came up when I was in the past 6 months, this says to email our agenda items to the town manager, but I know Madeline wanted me to email them to her. And now that I'm chair, I want to be in the know as well. So I also think that that should change. Either requests come to the chair or come to the chair and the town manager.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Which one, the chair or both?
Both.
Both.
Okay.
I agree both.
All right, any other comments? 6, order of business. I'll go out on a limb and say this is where Robert's rules outlines the order of business, and we say we follow Robert's rules. So this is a section that I think, it may change because Robert's rules allows for some flexibility, but I'm not sure it needs to be outlined here. For instance,
Can it just say follow Robert's rules guidelines?
yeah, and I think we have that above. I think, an example is we're allowing public comment at the beginning of the meeting and at the end. That's not here in this document. For the agenda today, I put on some updates at the very beginning. That technically is not on here. I think that there's, I'm just not sure we need to be this prescribed.
Yeah, agree.
Pat, it looks like you might have something to say. No? All right. All right, I just want to point out it is 9:07. Number 7, majority vote. So I think our town charter already spells this out, as well as spells out at least one, if not a couple situations where it's a majority plus 1 vote. And I think Maine law also has a few things, so I'm not sure this is necessary.
What, to have it in there, period, or?
Yeah. My thought is that the rules clarify anything that's not in our town charter, so to speak, that we want to say, hey, here's going to be our process.
I mean, it's not hurting anything being there, just like Rick said on an earlier piece, to have it doubled up and play, not this in particular, but Rick, did you not mention a few line items ago that you'd like to see certain things that hold importance doubled up?
Well, I don't know exactly what I said, but three affirmative votes are required to transaction of business. Robert's Rules of Order, I believe, discusses it. Our town charter discusses it. State law discusses it. If you want to leave it there, that's fine. I just think some things are, it's one sentence.
I think if we leave it there, then we have to clarify the times where it is not, there are certain votes that require majority plus 1.
I think that that's fine to do that, because when we do transition to that, it's important for us to be talking about it with the public instead of just jumping right into it, because it's going to come up, I'm sure.
Okay. Number 8. So this question came up tonight about public input. And I received some feedback that some people think we have not enough public input. Some people think we have enough public input, more than enough. Since I've been chair, we've actually tried it a couple of different ways. My thought process was to allow public input before any decision gets made. Overall, my thought is, as much as possible, our first meeting of the month be our business meeting where we make decisions. And our second meeting of the month be more discussion focused, and that's where, if we're introducing something, that's where it shows up first. But at the same time, not everything follows that nice orderly path either. Some things come up and they have to get decided on right away. And then there are some things we don't take public input on, like in the past, the board hasn't taken public input on appointees. I was listening to a meeting from last year, and Bunky made that very clear, that public comment is not allowed for appointments, or from his lens. Any other thoughts on 8?
I just want to make sure there's a separation between this portion and number 9, as far as public comment and public input.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, I just want to make sure. Can you clarify?
I think number 8 just clarifies when public input is supposed to happen. It points it as C in the process, versus I think number 9 kind of comments more on what we ask the general public when they're providing comments. Rick?
Number 8 tells us how to conduct a meeting.
Which is Robert's rules.
Which is Robert's rules, which is number 2 on this document. I mean, it goes right down to vote on the motion. I mean, it's repetitive. So this has, quite frankly, number 8 has nothing to do with public input, except where it is. So, I mean, select board questions, public input, additional questions, chairperson recites the motion. It's baby feeding you how to conduct town business, but we've already agreed that all meetings will be run in, through Robert's rules. So this is the same conversation I had I go back to John's thing at the beginning. It's 6 pages of repetitiveness. And Lindsay, if I said I liked it in a certain situation, I may have. And I'll have to go back and listen. I don't know exactly what I said. I may like it in certain cases, but this one here is definitely repeating Robert's rules, which is I guess that's my point, is if you look at number 2, which is Robert's rules, and I wish I could find it now, it's like just a quick sentence. Oh, there it is. Number 2, Robert's rules of order shall govern the proceedings of all select board meetings. Done. One sentence, done. Number 8 is A through H, if applicable, this, that. That is, number 8 is number 2.
Okay. Before I move on to number 9, I just want to say it's 9:15, 9:14. And so either we continue on with this, I don't think we're going to we might get through this document as our first pass, or do we want to give comments on the other documents? Do we want to leave this for now and at least provide 5 minutes on each of the other documents?
My personal opinion is we finish this one and we call it a night.
Okay.
Yep, I agree.
All right. Okay, number 9. Public comment period guidelines. I will just say, I think this is really hard because, and Rick, I know you're going to have some comments about this. At the end of the day, people have their First Amendment rights. But this is sort of our ask but it means that it requires, and I'm going to use the word policing. I'm not sure that's the right word, but it requires the discretion of the chair to be listening to someone and then be able to stop them if you think something here is not happening. And we've all seen times where it gets loud, somebody doesn't follow something here. And then there's times where it gets stopped, or somebody gets stopped or interrupted. So either, my suggestion is either we put this as our ideals.
You're off mute. There you go. You're okay.
Either we put this as our ideals, but it doesn't get policed, or we remove it altogether. Because as chair, I think trying to, if I'm sort of policing people, I don't feel like I'm really listening to their comments. That's just my thoughts.
I think a lot on this. I don't particularly care for having public comment in the beginning. I think that we start getting into that territory where do we decide now that they get to speak twice? If they can only speak in the beginning, but something comes up during the meeting, then we say they can't. But then if they can talk more than once, now we're getting into really adding to that. I think that it's important that people get to have public comment after big line items. So I liked the old way, and I know that that's an unpopular thing to say, but like, I don't know. Would like to hear other people's thoughts, I guess.
All right, thank you. Rick?
I think everybody knows my point on this. Okay. Once a municipality or government allows for public comment, and in case you don't know, we don't have to. I believe we should. But once you allow for public comment, people's First Amendment rights are even, the government's standards are held even to a higher standard. And I sent the past select board, actually the past two select boards, multiple case precedent on shutting people down. And I received no response. And when I got up to speak, I was shut down. I sat at the Dunaway Center for 2 workshops with our legal team, with our law firm. Public comment is just that, public comment. And they can say whatever they want to say, as long as they're not disruptive to the meeting. And I remember I asked Mary Costigan very nicely. I said, so I can say this as long as I say it really nice? And she said, absolutely. That's the point to public comment. So when I read these rules, and you guys have all heard me for years, and I read these rules where make a comment referencing support or opposition of any candidate for political office or political causes. That's ridiculous. That is the basis of our democracy. You should be able to, that's if this board or any board wants to allow public comment, and we should. I lean towards Lindsay's, I think 2 public comments is too much. I like our public comment at the end. I like having public comment throughout the meeting. And we've had some cases where some nasty things have been said. And you know what? That somebody's right. If you say it in a nice way, if you're not nasty about it, you can say it. And I, for one, was shut down numerous times. I ran this time on a platform of if somebody has something to say, you can say it. There were comments made tonight that were absolute, blatant inaccuracies. And I'm not going to sit here and debate them, but they were inaccuracies. That's their right. We all want everybody to tell the truth and be honest, but this is what everybody signed up for. Is you want to be in public office, you must And you all heard me in meetings. There's a reason our founding fathers made it the First Amendment. It's not the 7th, it's not the 9th, it's the first. Okay? And it's the most important right you have as an American citizen. And there are a lot of countries that you don't have that right. So, good, bad, indifferent, your worst enemy, you don't like them. They have the right to say whatever they want to say. And we should never censor anybody. I'm done.
And what I remember from one of Mary Costigan's trainings or the workshops was the minute you do start to limit something, you have to be consistent. So if you do it to one person, you have to do it to every other person who comes down the line and sort of violates the same rule. And so, disparage individual select board member. Let's just say that. So if you stop somebody from commenting about an individual select board member, then you have to stop disparaging an individual select board member, then you have to stop everyone who does it. Because the minute you start allowing some and then not allowing others is the minute that you're getting yourself into trouble. And I think we've seen it. I will say as chair, I don't feel like if this is, certainly my job is to facilitate our meetings, but I worry about that line because, something gets said and I'm processing it. Do I stop them in enough time? And then, so I allow it. And then the next person I stop them, then we have a situation that somebody can file a complaint, and it could be a valid complaint of, well, you allowed it these 10 other times and now you're not allowing me to do it.
Which, Mr. Chair, is more to my point. The word disparage is very subject as to whom is listening and whom is speaking. I personally took some comments tonight disparaging. They were digs at me. I'm okay with it. It's their right to do it. People have an opinion about me, good or bad, and they have the right. We ask that they tell the truth, but I'm not going to get into a debate with them that, well, you said this and he said that. I'm not going to do it. Let them say what they have to say. Everybody has that right, and we move on.
So let me just take a little bit of do we scrap this section altogether? Do we provide a paragraph? Or do we treat it more as here is our ask, but then thereafter it's beyond the ask, it isn't necessarily enforced.
I'm not sure which way you all want to lean with this, but I do not think people should get up on the podium and campaign, reference support or opposition for candidates for political office or political causes. That's a pretty general one and there's not really anywhere I've ever lived or worked in or been where that was allowed in a town hall meeting. So I really don't think that should be removed. And
can I make a comment to that?
Yeah.
Lindsay, with the utmost respect, the last election season, you spoke about strong women running and candidates. That's campaigning. And that's your First Amendment right.
That's not an individual.
We have one of the hugest elections coming up in November, and we would consider, first of all, I don't think you have the legal right. It would just set us up for complete disaster. But you don't want somebody to be able to come to a podium if we're live by then and say, this is the person I'm campaigning for and these are the reasons why. That is democracy.
Not
And
in a town hall meeting like that. There's specific situations built for that. That's not in a, I would really encourage you to look deeper into that, because I do believe you're, with the utmost respect, I think you're incredibly incorrect.
Okay. I would recommend another workshop with the town attorney and First Amendment precedent setting, huge settlements against municipalities when people's First Amendment rights were shut down. Huge.
Okay. Not saying that people don't have a time and place to talk about that. And also using the reference that I talked about, strong women running for office is campaigning, is really kind of, I guess I shouldn't say much more, but I think that's kind of.
Lindsay, I hope you didn't take that.
I did take it very personal, but
I
we won't.
apologize if you took that personally, but I'm trying to explain to you how a person may take that as campaigning. And that's perfectly fine. I think it's good. That's what our country was founded on. Compromise and democracy.
Yeah?
Yes.
Can I speak? I'm a little torn on this too. I love public input, and I don't want to go back to the times when people complain they don't have a chance to speak. You know, having two public inputs when the same people speak at both times, that doesn't really add value to me. I don't know what I mean. If you do stick with two public inputs, beginning and end, if you do, I'm not saying I can go either way. I'll support. I can be persuaded either way. But if we end up going with two like we're doing now, maybe I just say one person only speak once, the whole night. Because otherwise, as far as political campaigning goes, if we allow them to get Rick, I believe in freedom of speech as well as you do. If we let people go to the podium to support their candidate, whether it's local or federal, we could be there till midnight, 3 minutes time, 20. Eventually we'll gain some momentum. And we'll say, well, she's going to speak about her candidate. I'm going to speak on mine. I'm going to speak on his. We could have 25 people up there times 3 minutes. I don't want that. It could end up that way. So for our benefit, I don't support political campaign at the podium. For our benefit, maybe that's wrong. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move us along. Again, I don't consider this our only discussion. So I just want to point out we have gone over. So, but I also feel like we said we want to get through this document. But we're only halfway through. So I would like to call it at this point before we move on to number 10, if that is okay with everyone. Okay,
So
I think
pick
we're
up
good.
will be on decorum and order.
What's that?
When we pick up next, we'll be on decorum and order.
We will be, but again, I don't consider this the only time where we're talking about, Bob is not here tonight. So I anticipate we're going to revisit 1 through 9 again at some point, but yes, for the purpose of, we'll pick up at 10 and then we'll go back through a whole review. Probably not item by item at that point, and we may be looking at a document with some suggested changes based off of our discussion so far. All right, question, because I don't remember, do we need to take a motion to adjourn our workshop? Anyone know? Pat, do you know?
No.
I don't think you have to take a formal motion, but you do need to acknowledge you're leaving for the evening so that we can say goodnight.
All right, I would like to adjourn the meeting. Is everyone okay with that? All right, seeing everyone's okay with that, then this workshop is adjourned at 9:29 p.m. We'll see you all in a couple